Hey there, fellow wanderers of the night. If you're tuning in for tales that soothe the soul, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know your own quiet reflections on the paths less traveled. Imagine, if you will, the gentle hush of a 13th century dawn along the ancient trails of Europe, where the Camino de Santiago unfurls like a ribbon of whispers through sun-dappled forests and rolling hills. This is the beginning of our story, beyond the legends of a medieval pilgrim, a soft invitation to step into a world where every step echoes with purpose and peace. In those distant days, travelers set out not for haste or glory, but for the quiet call of the spirit, drawn to the sacred route that led to the grand shrine in Santiago de Compostela. Here, amid the soft rustle of leaves and the distant chime of monastery bells, ordinary souls embarked on journeys that transcended the mundane, seeking the divine in the rhythm of their own footsteps. Picture them now, these pilgrims of old, wrapped in simple cloaks of wool that swayed with the breeze, their faces softened by the golden light of early morning. They moved in a steady procession, not in crowds but in thoughtful pairs or solitary reverie, their boots pressing into the crunching gravel of well-worn paths. The sound was a lullaby in itself, a gentle crackle underfoot, like the whisper of secrets shared with the earth. As they walked, the air carried the faint scent of wild herbs and blooming heather, mingling with the earthy aroma of dew-kissed soil, inviting a sense of calm that wrapped around them like a warm shawl. These were not warriors or kings, but everyday folk merchants, farmers, and artisans who left behind their hearths and families for a pilgrimage that promised renewal of the heart. The Camino de Santiago, that storied way, stretched across vast landscapes, from the rugged Pyrenees to the verdant plains of Spain, a path illuminated by the stars and the faint glow of roadside shrines. Historical accounts from medieval scribes, like those in the Pilgrim's Guide, speak of travelers who rose with the first light, their days unfolding in a serene cadence. They carried little more than a staff for balance and a scallop shell as a symbol of their quest, each item a quiet companion in their spiritual odyssey. The rhythm of their journey was one of gentle repetition, the soft thud of feet on stone, the occasional murmur of a prayer carried on the wind, and the distant tolling of bells from hidden chapels, each peal a reminder of the sacred destination ahead. In this world, time slowed, allowing thoughts to drift like clouds across a summer sky, fostering a deep, introspective peace that modern souls might envy. As they trekked, the pilgrims encountered the subtle wonders of the natural world, which historical records from the era describe with poetic reverence. The air might carry the sweet tang of ripening olives in the southern reaches, or the crisp, pine-scented breath of mountain passes, each sensation weaving into the fabric of their inner voyage. One could almost hear the faint rustle of a stream nearby, its waters murmuring over smooth pebbles, offering a moment's respite for weary feet. These sensory tapestries were not mere backdrop. They were integral to the pilgrimage, drawing the mind toward contemplation and away from the clamor of daily life. Accounts from wayfarers of the time, preserved in manuscripts like the Codex Calixtinus, recount how the path itself became a teacher, guiding pilgrims through meadows where wildflowers nodded in the breeze, and bird song provided a harmonious soundtrack to their reflections. At the heart of this journey lay the spiritual essence, a profound quest for connection with the divine that historical sources portray as a gentle unfolding. Pilgrims viewed the Camino not as a trial, but as a sacred thread linking the earthly to the eternal, where every milestone cross marked a step closer to enlightenment. They paused at wayside crosses, their fingers tracing the worn stone as if communing with unseen forces, feeling the cool texture under their touch, and listening to the wind's soft sigh through the branches above. This was a time when faith was as tangible as the path beneath them, a force that eased the soul and fostered a sense of unity with the cosmos. Subtle wit often flavored these accounts, with scribes noting how even the simplest pilgrim might find humor in the way a stray ray of sunlight danced on their cloak, as if the heavens themselves were sharing a knowing smile. Yet, amid this tranquility, there lingers a mystery that adds a layer of enchantment to the tale. The unrecorded names of those who walked these paths. Historical records from the 13th century, drawn from pilgrim diaries and monastic logs, reveal how many travelers chose anonymity, their identities dissolving into the vast tapestry of the journey. Why did they vanish from the annals? Perhaps it was a deliberate choice, a way to embody the purity of their quest, where the self faded into the collective spirit of the road. Imagine the soft whisper of forgotten stories, carried on the evening breeze as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that hid faces never to be named. This enigma, unique to the Camino's lore, invites us to ponder the countless souls who left no trace, their steps echoing in the crunch of gravel long after they passed, a gentle reminder that some journeys are meant to remain ethereal, untouched by the weight of history's pen. As the day waned, pilgrims sought shelter in humble hospices along the route, places where the air was filled with the warm scent of baking bread and the flicker of candlelight. These way stations, mentioned in reliable chronicles, offered not luxury but a simple haven, where travelers could rest on straw mats and listen to the distant hoot of an owl or the rustle of leaves outside. The sensory details of these evenings were profound: the soft glow of embers in a hearth, the faint herbal aroma of medicinal teas shared among companions, and the rhythmic breathing of fellow seekers lulling all into a peaceful slumber. It was here that the spiritual journey deepened, with pilgrims sharing quiet tales of visions or insights, their voices blending with the night like a soothing melody. Throughout the Camino, the landscape itself became a canvas for introspection, with historical examples illustrating how pilgrims drew inspiration from the world around them. In the rolling hills of Navarra, for instance, the gentle sway of golden fields under a vast sky evoked a sense of infinite possibility as described in period accounts. The cool mist that often cloaked the mornings added a layer of mystery, beating on cloaks like tiny pearls and enhancing the aura of the sacred. These elements, woven into the fabric of the pilgrimage, emphasized the transformative power of the path, where the physical act of walking mirrored the soul's ascent toward grace. In this 13th century world, the pilgrim's life was a symphony of subtle harmonies, a testament to the enduring allure of the spiritual quest. As we reflect on these serene travels, we glimpse a legacy that continues to inspire, where the crunch of gravel and the toll of bells speak of journeys that transcend time. And so, as our introduction draws to a close, let us prepare to venture further into the legends that await, exploring the deeper mysteries of this ancient way in the segments to come. Until then, may your own path be filled with peaceful steps and whispered wonders. In the soft glow of dawn over medieval Assisi, where ancient stones whispered secrets to the wind, a figure emerged from the shadows of the Basilica of San Francesco. He wore a simple robe of coarse wool, its fibers rustling gently with each step. Like leaves stirred by a benevolent breeze, the air carried the faint scent of blooming wildflowers and incense from the church's dim interior, where flickering candles cast a warm, golden light. This was Francesco, born in 1181 to a merchant family, a man whose heart had turned from worldly pursuits to the embrace of divine simplicity. His voice, soft and melodic, drew crowds to the stone-paved squares and arched doorways, where he preached not of battles or strife, but of a profound love for all creation. The churches of Assisi, with their cool, echoing halls and walls adorned in faded frescoes, became his sanctuary and stage. Imagine the scene. The sun climbing higher, its rays filtering through narrow windows to dance upon the flagstones, while bird-song from the nearby hills wove through his words like a harmonious thread. Francesco stood there, his bare feet grounded on the earth, his robe's hood drawn back to reveal a face lined with quiet wisdom and a subtle smile that hinted at unseen joys. He spoke of humility, of seeing God in every creature, from the sparrows flitting overhead to the wildflowers pushing through cracks in the stone. "Be praised, my Lord, for our sister Mother Earth," he might say, his tone as soothing as a lullaby, inviting listeners to pause and feel the warmth of the sun on their skin, the gentle brush of fabric against their own garments. In those early days, Francesco's teachings flowed from a life transformed. He had wandered the roads of Umbria, his eyes open to the beauty of poverty, much like the way a stream carves its path through unyielding rock, not with force, but with persistent grace. Drawing from the Franciscan chronicles, such as those penned by Thomas of Celano, we glimpse how he embraced a vow of simplicity, shedding the luxuries of his youth for a tunic held together by a simple cord. The crowds gathered, their murmurs soft as the rustle of olive leaves in the wind, drawn by tales of his encounters with the natural world. He would extend a hand to a weary traveler or share a meal of bread and water, teaching that true wealth lay in the spirit, not in possessions. The air in the church filled with the subtle aroma of herbs from the gardens outside, mingling with the earthy scent of the congregation's woolen cloaks, creating a tapestry of sensory peace that enveloped all who listened. One might picture him in the Porciuncula, a humble chapel nestled amid green fields, its wooden door creaking open to reveal a space bathed in the soft light of oil lamps. There, amidst the faint hum of bees drifting in from blooming meadows, Francesco preached the value of forgiveness and peace. His words, recorded in the Chronicles of the Friars Minor, emphasized living in harmony with all beings, as if the world itself were a great symphony. "Consider the birds of the air," he would say, his voice rising and falling like the song of a lark at twilight. "They neither sow nor reap, yet our Father cares for them." The listeners, perhaps a mix of farmers and artisans, felt the weight of his message in the cool stone beneath their feet, and the gentle breeze that carried whispers of distant bells, reminding them of life's fleeting beauty. As the seasons turned, Francesco's influence spread like the first light of morning across the hills. He gathered followers, men who donned robes much like his own, their footsteps echoing softly in the church corridors as they learned from his example. In the Basilica of Santa Maria degli Angeli, with its vaulted ceilings that seemed to touch the sky, he taught the Canticle of the Sun, a prayer that celebrated the elements of creation. "Be praised, my Lord, through sister water," he intoned, and one could almost hear the trickle of a nearby stream, feel the cool mist on one's face, as if nature itself joined in the chorus. His subtle wit shone through in simple stories, like the time he spoke to a flock of birds, their wings fluttering in response, a moment that left his audience smiling softly, enveloped in the warmth of shared wonder. Yet, woven into this serene narrative is the quiet mystery of the Camino's relics, enigma that lingers like a faint perfume in the air of Assisi's sacred spaces. The chronicles speak of artifacts tied to Francesco's life, perhaps a worn cloak, or a humble cross that journeyed along paths reminiscent of ancient pilgrim routes. Though we tread carefully here, avoiding any overlap with tales of wayfarers. These relics, said to hold a divine essence, were venerated in the churches, their presence a source of gentle contemplation. Whispers among the faithful suggested that one relic, a simple wooden staff he once carried, bore marks that defied explanation, as if touched by an otherworldly hand. In the dim light of the basilica, visitors might trace their fingers over its surface, feeling the smooth grain under their skin, and ponder how such an ordinary object could embody such profound grace. This mystery, distinct and veiled, invites reflection on the unseen forces that guided Francesco's path, a puzzle that unfolds not in dramatic revelations, but in the quiet rustle of cloth and the play of shadows on ancient walls. Through it all, his spiritual teachings remained the heart of his message, drawn from the authentic accounts in the Legenda Mayor by Bonaventure. He urged his listeners to embrace poverty not as deprivation, but as freedom, allowing one to wander the world with the lightness of a feather borne on the wind. In the church of San Damiano, where the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and wild roses climbing the exterior, he spoke of inner peace, his words flowing like a river over stones, smooth and unhurried. "Love your neighbor as yourself," he would say, and the congregation could hear the distant bleat of sheep from the pastures, feel the sun's gentle warmth seeping through the stone, reminding them of the interconnectedness of all life. As years passed, Francesco's devotion deepened, his days filled with prayer and contemplation in the tranquil gardens surrounding the churches. The sensory world around him, the chirp of crickets at dusk, the cool touch of dew on grass mirrored his teachings, each element a testament to divine order. He composed songs and poems, their rhythms as soothing as a mother's hush, encouraging others to find God in the everyday. The taste of fresh bread, the sight of stars piercing the night sky, the sound of wind sighing through the cypress trees. In the final chapters of his life, as recorded in the chronicles, Francesco's spirit remained undimmed, his legacy a beacon of gentle wisdom. He retreated often to the hills, where the air was crisp and pure, and the birdsong served as his constant companion. There, in moments of solitude, he reflected on the mysteries that bound the seen and unseen, including the elusive truth behind the Camino's relics, which continued to inspire awe without revealing their secrets. And so, as the sun sets over Assisi, casting a golden hue upon its churches, we leave Francesco's story with a breath of tranquility, his teachings echoing like a distant, comforting melody. Perhaps, in the quiet that follows, one might glimpse the next path where other tales await, as softly as the rustle of a robe in the wind. In the soft hush of a 13th century twilight, the ancient stones of Compostela whispered secrets to the wind. Pilgrims, draped in heavy woolen cloaks that carried the faint scent of distant forests and river mists, made their way toward the grand cathedral. Their footsteps echoed gently on the cobbled paths, a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat, drawing them to the heart of mystery where relics lay enshrined. The air was cool and laced with the sweet, smoky aroma of melting candle wax, its warmth flickering against the chill of the stone walls. Here, in this sacred enclave, the faithful sought solace, their journeys culminating in quiet reverence for artifacts that bridge the earthly and the divine. The relics of the Camino de Santiago, foremost among them the supposed remains of St. James the Apostle, held a lure that transcended the ordinary. These bones, carefully preserved in a silver casket within the cathedral's crypt, were said to have been discovered centuries earlier by a humble shepherd guided by a celestial light. Archaeological reports from excavations along the pilgrimage routes, such as those conducted in the 20th century at sites like the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, paint a picture of devotion rooted in medieval faith. Yet, even then, in the 1200s, whispers of uncertainty lingered like the last notes of a vesper bell. The origins of these relics were shrouded in the mists of time, their authenticity a puzzle that scholars and pilgrims alike pondered under the dim glow of oil lamps. Imagine, if you will, a pilgrim pausing at the threshold of the crypt, their cloak brushing against the cool granite as they knelt. The air grew thick with the scent of incense, a blend of myrrh and frankincense that evoked distant lands and forgotten rituals. Candles lined the walls, their flames dancing lazily, casting elongated shadows that played across the vaulted ceilings. Each drip of wax onto the stone floor was a soft, almost musical sound, a reminder of the passage of time and the impermanence of all things. In this serene space, the relics beckoned, promising glimpses of the divine through their enigmatic presence. Historians, drawing from reports of medieval excavations and early chronicles, suggest that the relics' journey to Compostela was as mysterious as the stars that guided the original discoverers. Legend spoke of St. James' body being carried by angels across the sea to this very spot, a tale that archaeological findings have sought to verify. Digs in the area have uncovered fragments of early medieval sarcophagi and votive offerings, items that date back to the 9th century when the site first gained prominence. These artifacts, simple yet profound pieces of carved bone and weathered coins, hint at a devotion that predated the relic's enshrinement, but the true origins remained elusive, a veil of unknowns that added to their allure. Were these the actual bones of the apostle, or clever forgeries crafted in an era when relics could command fortunes and inspire wars? The uncertainty was a gentle undercurrent, like the flow of a stream through a quiet valley, inviting contemplation rather than doubt. As the pilgrims gathered in the dim light, their cloaks rustling softly like leaves in a breeze, they shared tales of the road, One might speak of the faint echo of footsteps in the cathedral's nave, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, while another described the cool touch of the stone relics through the glass of their reliquary. The sensory world of Compostela was alive with such details. The subtle warmth of beeswax melting under careful hands, the earthy taste of water drawn from ancient wells nearby, and the faint metallic tang of the silver casings that housed the sacred remains. These elements wove a tapestry of experience, calming the soul and easing the mind into a state of peaceful inquiry. The mystery deepened when one considered the archaeological evidence. Reports from modern studies, such as those by the Spanish National Research Council, have analyzed the cathedral's foundations and the relics themselves, revealing layers of history that speak to a more complex narrative. In the 13th century, as now, the relics were not merely objects but symbols of faith, their purported miracles drawing crowds from across Europe. Yet questions persisted about their provenance. Some scholars posited that the bones might have been those of a local martyr, misattributed in the fervor of early Christianity. This uncertainty, handled with a detached curiosity, added a layer of intrigue without diminishing the reverence. The consequences of such mysteries were felt in the quiet devotion of the pilgrims, who found comfort in the ambiguity, much like the way a soft fog envelopes a path, obscuring yet illuminating the way forward. In the cathedral's chapels, adorned with faded frescoes that depicted biblical scenes, the air carried a hush broken only by the occasional murmur of prayer. A pilgrim might reach out, their fingers grazing the cool metal of the reliquary, feeling the faint vibrations of the stones beneath. The scent of aged parchment from nearby manuscripts mingled with the candle wax, creating an atmosphere that was both grounding and ethereal. Here, the unknowns of the relic's origins became a source of subtle wit among the learned. One monk might quip, in the gentlest of tones, that if the bones could speak, they might reveal themselves as those of a forgotten traveler rather than a saint, though such thoughts were shared with a smile as light as morning mist. As evening deepened, the pilgrims would linger, their cloaks drawn close against the cooling air, absorbing the sensory symphony around them. The stone echoes of footsteps and whispers created a lullaby of sorts, a rhythmic cadence that soothed weary hearts. Archaeological insights, gleaned from sites along the Camino, such as the crypts of Pamplona or the ancient paths of Leon, reinforced the relic's role in medieval spirituality. These reports describe similar venerated objects, relic fragments, and amulets found in burial sites, suggesting a widespread network of belief. Yet for the relics in Compostela, the core mystery remained. How had they endured through wars and shifts in power to inspire such enduring faith? The answer lay not in definitive proof, but in the human need for wonder, a need that the 13th century shared with our own time. Transitioning from the physical to the metaphysical, the pilgrims often reflected on the relic's influence on the broader tapestry of European history, without delving into the daily struggles of the road or figures from other tales. One could appreciate how these mysteries fostered a sense of unity among diverse travelers. The faint glow of candles, the resonant hum of the cathedral stones, and the lingering aroma of sacred oils all conspired to create a space where the unknown was not feared but embraced. In this way, the relics of the Camino de Santiago stood as enduring enigmas, their stories unfolding like a gentle river, flowing toward horizons yet unseen. As the night settled over Compostela, with the last echoes fading into silence, the pilgrims prepared to rest, their minds lulled by the calming rhythm of the sacred. And as the stars twinkled above, another path of discovery awaited, ready to unfold in the quiet dawn. In the hushed embrace of a 13th century Spanish cathedral, where ancient stones whispered secrets of bygone eras, the dean's residence stood as a bastion of quiet grandeur. Nestled within the shadow of Toledo's towering spires, this sanctuary of stone and reverence offered a world apart from the clamor of the city below. Here, amid vaulted ceilings etched with faint frescoes of saints and seraphim, the deans moved through their days with the measured grace of those who tended eternal flames. The air carried the faint, soothing scent of beeswax candles and smoldering incense, wisps that curled like lazy dreams through the cool, dim halls. Life in this residence unfolded with a rhythm as steady as the tolling bells from the nearby nave. The deans, clad in flowing robes of deep crimson and ivory, were figures of dignified poise, their garments whispering against the flagstones as they glided from chamber to chamber. These men, selected from the ranks of learned clergy, bore the weight of ecclesiastical authority with an air of serene authority. Their days began at dawn, when the first light filtered through narrow arched windows, casting elongated shadows that danced like silent acolytes across the walls. In the scriptorium, a quill might scratch softly against parchment, the sound a gentle murmur like rain on leaves. As one dean recorded tithes or composed missives to distant bishops, the ink, dark as midnight wine, flowed in precise lines, preserving the church's intricate web of accounts and decrees. Meals in the great hall were moments of understated splendor, a daily ritual that celebrated the opulence of their calling without ostentation. Picture the long trestle table, hewn from ancient oak and polished to a warm sheen, laden with platters of roasted pheasant glazed in honey and herbs, flanked by loaves of crusty bread still warm from the ovens. The deans gathered at eventide, their robes pooling around them like pools of liquid velvet as they settled onto carved benches. A servant, unobtrusive as a shadow, poured rich malmsey wine from silver ewers, the liquid catching the flicker of candlelight and shimmering like captured sunlight. The hall itself, with its high stone walls etched with intricate carvings of vines and crosses, echoed with the soft clink of goblets and the murmur of Latin phrases exchanged in low voices. One might detect the earthy aroma of roasted chestnuts mingling with the spicy notes of saffron-infused stews, a feast drawn from the cathedral's vast estates. Subtle wit flavored their conversations, as when a dean remarked on the wine's vintage with a dry quip, "This nectar from Andalusian vines rivals the rivers of paradise, yet spares us the angels' envy." Beyond the meals, the residence hummed with the quiet industry of devotion and scholarship. The deans, drawn from chronicles like those of the Toledo Cathedral archives, were not mere administrators, but custodians of sacred knowledge. They pored over illuminated manuscripts in the library, a chamber redolent with the musty perfume of aged vellum and the faint tang of iron gall ink. Here, the play of light through stained glass windows painted the room in hues of ruby and sapphire, while the turning of pages created a soothing cadence, like the rustle of autumn leaves in a gentle breeze. One dean might dictate a sermon, his voice a soft baritone that wove through the air, while another consulted medieval records, such as the Liber Ordinis of the Spanish Church, to ensure the accuracy of liturgical calendars. These documents, preserved with meticulous care, spoke of a world where every detail held divine significance. From the precise alignment of celestial events to the allocation of tithes that sustained the residence's comforts. Yet, amid this tapestry of tranquility, a thread of mystery wove through the halls, a whisper of enigma that lent an undercurrent of intrigue to the dean's lives. It was the tale of the lost residence treasures, artifacts of inestimable value that had vanished like mist at dawn. According to accounts from the cathedral's own registers, dating back to the early 1200s, a collection of relics and jewels had been amassed over generations, perhaps a jeweled crosier encrusted with emeralds from Moorish spoils, or a gilded reliquary holding fragments of saints' bones. These items were not merely ornaments, but symbols of the church's enduring power, housed in a locked vault beneath the residence. One winter's eve, as snow blanketed Toledo and the winds howled like distant lamentations, the treasures simply disappeared. No intruders were reported. No signs of forced entry marred the heavy oak doors. The deans, upon discovery, conducted inquiries with detached resolve, their expressions unchanging as they reviewed the sparse records. The consequence was a lingering shadow, a quiet unease that permeated the air. Yet they spoke of it in hushed tones, as if to acknowledge it too loudly might summon further misfortune. Some speculated that a wayward scribe, driven by unspoken greed, had orchestrated the disappearance, while others whispered of divine intervention, a test of faith from on high. Whatever the truth, the mystery endured, a subtle reminder that even in opulence, the unseen could unravel the known. As the days turned, the deans found solace in the simple rituals that defined their existence. Afternoons might bring a stroll through the cloistered gardens, where the scent of blooming lavender and rosemary mingled with the earthy dampness of moss-covered stones. The gardens, tended by silent gardeners, offered a pocket of serenity, with bees humming lazily among the flowers and the occasional fountain trickling like a lullaby. Here, a dean could pause to reflect, his robe brushing against the foliage as he contemplated the stars that would soon pierce the evening sky. Evenings often ended in the chapel, a smaller sanctum within the residence, where chants rose in harmonious waves, the incense smoke curling upward like prayers ascending to heaven. The air grew heavy with the sweet, resinous fragrance, and the candle flames flickered steadily, their lights steady as the dean's faith. Historical records from the era, such as those in the Cathedrals of Spain compilation, paint a picture of lives intertwined with the broader church hierarchy. The deans answered to archbishops in distant courts, their correspondence carried by trusted messengers who navigated rugged paths under the Iberian sun. Yet, within these walls, their world was self-contained, a microcosm of medieval splendor. One might imagine the tactile pleasure of a finely woven tapestry, its threads depicting biblical scenes, or the cool weight of a silver chalice passed during private masses. Subtle wit surfaced in their gatherings, as when a dean jested about the challenges of maintaining such finery. These robes, heavy as our duties, remind us that even silk can chafe under the weight of eternity. Through it all, the residence remained a haven, its opulence a gentle balm against the harshness of the outside world. The deans' lives, documented in fragments from church ledgers, were marked by a profound sense of continuity, each day a link in an unbroken chain. But as the night deepened and the last candles guttered, one couldn't help but feel the pull of the unknown, the lost treasures, still unrecovered, enigma that hinted at stories yet untold. And so, as the residents settled into silence, the scene fades, leaving whispers of what might come next in the vast tapestry of the church's history. In the quiet hush of a 13th century dawn, where mist clung to the ancient oaks like a gentle veil, groups of pilgrims stirred along the winding trails of the Camino. They were humble souls, draped in coarse woolen cloaks that whispered against the earth with every step, their faces etched by the soft play of morning light. These travelers, drawn from distant corners of Europe, farmers from England, merchants from France, artisans from Germany, embarked on their journeys not for haste, but for a rhythm as old as the paths themselves. The Camino de Santiago stretched before them, a tapestry of dirt and stone, where each day unfolded like a slow, meandering dream, guided by the sun's arc and the pull of faith. As the first rays kissed the treetops, the pilgrims rose from their makeshift beds, perhaps a patch of soft grass beneath a sheltering beech, or a shared inn floor strewn with straw. The air carried the faint, earthy scent of dew-dampened leaves, and the world awoke with them, birdsong threading through the branches like a lullaby. They began with simple rituals, murmuring prayers under their breath as they folded their cloaks and tightened the cords of their sandals. A wooden cross or a small vial of holy water might be kissed for luck, the metal cool against worn fingers. These moments were not rushed. Time in those days flowed like a lazy stream, allowing for the quiet rustle of fabric and the distant lowing of a cow in some unseen meadow. Breakfast, if it could be called that, was sparse and shared. A hunk of dark bread, perhaps bartered from a roadside farmer or packed from the previous village, was broken among companions. The taste was plain, grainy on the tongue, yet warmed by the steam of weak ale, or a sip of water drawn from a clear, babbling brook. As they ate, the pilgrims spoke in hushed tones, their voices blending with the soft crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional crackle of a small fire. One might recount a dream from the night before, a vision of saints or shadowed paths, adding a touch of subtle wit to the morning's calm. How the divine, it seemed, had a knack for arriving unannounced, much like an unexpected rain shower on a clear day. With the sun climbing higher, the true rhythm of the day commenced. The walk. They moved in loose groups, cloaks swaying like shadows in the breeze, their feet tracing the well-worn tracks that cut through forests and over gentle hills. The Camino was a living thing, its surface a mosaic of pebbles and fallen acorns that crunched softly beneath their soles, a sound as comforting as a heartbeat. Wildflowers nodded along the edges, releasing hints of sweet lavender and thyme into the air, while the distant chant of a fellow pilgrim's hymn floated on the wind, a melodic thread that wove through the landscape. These walks were not marches, but meditations, where each step carried the weight of intention, the pilgrims pausing now and then to rest against a mossy stone or to gaze at a flock of birds wheeling overhead. Midday brought a pause in the routine, a sacred interlude under the warm embrace of the sun. They sought shade beneath ancient elms, their branches forming a canopy that filtered the light into a dappled dance. Here, they might share stories from pilgrim accounts, like those whispered in the tales of the Cistercian monks, or the itinerant writings of wayfarers who documented their treks. One such account spoke of a pilgrim from Aquitaine who found solace in the simple act of midday rest, noting how the sun's warmth eased weary bones, as if the heavens themselves offered respite. They ate lightly, perhaps a piece of cheese or dried figs, savoring the flavors that mingled with the scent of sun-baked earth and the faint, salty tang of sweat on their skin. In these moments, the mystery of unrecorded schedules began to unfurl, a gentle enigma that hovered like mist over a pond. For not all routines were chronicled in the ledgers of history. Some days blurred into nights without note, schedules shaped by whim or weather rather than decree. A sudden detour for a hidden spring or an impromptu halt to watch a deer graze could alter the path, leaving behind traces that faded like footprints in the rain. As the afternoon waned, the pilgrims pressed on, their cloaks now heavy with the day's dust, each fold carrying the story of miles traversed. The air grew cooler, carrying whispers of pine and the distant rumble of a stream, while the path sloped gently downward toward the next hamlet. They walked with a steady gait, the rhythm punctuated by the soft thud of staffs against the ground and the occasional jingle of a pilgrim's bell, a sound that echoed like a distant memory. Wit crept in subtly, as one traveler might jest about the sun's reluctance to set, prolonging their journey as if the sky itself were a reluctant companion. Yet beneath this lightness lay the unyielding pull of their quest, a daily cadence drawn from historical threads like the accounts of the Pilgrim's Guide, which spoke of endurance wrapped in quiet devotion. Evening descended like a soft blanket, the sky blushing with hues of rose and gold as the pilgrims approached their night's haven. Whether it was a modest hostel with straw-strewn floors or a clearing under the stars, the arrival marked a transition from movement to reflection. They gathered water from a nearby well, its cool splash against their hands, a soothing ritual, and prepared for the evening meal. Soups of barley and herbs simmered over open flames, the aroma rising like an offering, mingling with the crackling wood and the night insects' chorus. These shared meals fostered bonds, conversations flowing as smoothly as the wine from a communal flask, each voice a thread in the tapestry of their collective experience. In the fading light, the mystery deepened the unrecorded schedules that history had overlooked. While some pilgrims noted their days in journals or oral tales, others let their routines dissolve into the ether, guided by intuition rather than inscription. Perhaps a group veered off course one evening, drawn by the allure of a starlit glade, their actions lost to time like leaves carried away by the wind. This enigma added a layer of intrigue to their lives, a subtle reminder that not all paths were mapped, not all moments preserved. As night fully enveloped the trail, the pilgrims settled into rest, their cloaks drawn close for warmth. The air grew still, save for the occasional owl's call and the rustle of leaves settling for sleep. They recited evening prayers, the words a soothing murmur that blended with the night's symphony, each breath a step toward renewal. In these final hours, the routine circled back to its essence, a cycle of simplicity and grace, where the morrow promised more of the same gentle rhythm. Yet, as the stars wheeled above, one couldn't help but ponder the unseen patterns, the schedules that slipped through the fingers of time. And so, with the whisper of the wind through the trees, we leave these pilgrims to their dreams, turning our gaze toward the echoes of their enduring faith. Word count, 1,500. In the soft hush of a 13th century dawn, where mist clung to the ancient trails like a gentle veil, pilgrims set forth across Europe's winding paths. These travelers, cloaked in woolen robes that whispered against the earth with each step, carried the weight of devotion in their simple gear. The air carried the faint scent of dew-kissed herbs and aged leather, a calming rhythm that soothed the soul amid the vast, undulating landscapes. Far from the clamor of cities, they moved as shadows on the horizon, their staffs tapping a steady beat against the dusty tracks, a lullaby of pilgrimage echoing through the quiet. Each pilgrim's cloak often dyed in earthy tones of mud and moss draped heavily over their shoulders, its fabric coarse yet comforting. Woven from the wool of distant sheepfolds, these garments shielded against the capricious winds that swept down from the Pyrenees or across the plains of France. The creaking of leather straps, securing the cloak at the neck, added a subtle melody to their journey, a faint protest against the burdens it bore. In the cool morning light, one could almost feel the cloak's warmth, like an embrace from a long-forgotten friend, warding off the chill that lingered in the valleys. These cloaks, inspired by the practical designs seen in artifacts from the Camino de Santiago, were more than mere attire. They were symbols of endurance, their folds hiding small pouches for sacred tokens. At their side, the staff stood as a faithful companion, a tall length of ash or oak, smoothed by countless hands before theirs. Gripped firmly, yet gently, it probed the uneven ground ahead, its polished surface cool under calloused palms. The soft thud of its tip against the packed earth created a rhythmic pulse, like the heartbeat of the trail itself, guiding weary feet over stones and roots. Historical records from the Codex Calixtinus, a guide for those on the Camino, describe such staffs as essential, often carved with simple notches to mark miles traveled. In the fading light of evening, the staff's shadow stretched long, a silent sentinel against the encroaching dark, its wood whispering tales of pilgrims past. Beyond the cloak and staff, the scrip, a leather pouch slung across the chest, held the essentials of survival. Crafted from tanned hides that emitted a rich, earthy aroma when warmed by the sun, the scrip dangled with a slight sway, its flaps secured by knotted cords that rustled softly in the breeze. Inside, pilgrims stowed crusts of bread, perhaps a flask of watered wine, and tokens like the iconic scallop shell, artifacts unearthed from Camino sites that spoke of a shared faith. The shell, smooth and iridescent, caught the light in fleeting glimmers, a reminder of the ocean's distant call. As the pouch brushed against their sides with each stride, it released a faint scent of oil and salt, evoking the coastal paths where seabirds cried overhead. Footwear, too, played its quiet role in this symphony of travel. Sturdy boots, laced with cords of hemp, encased feet that had tread miles of rugged terrain. The leather creaked subtly with every bend of the sole, a sound as reassuring as a hearthside fire, while the dust of the path settled into the seams, carrying the scent of sun-baked soil and wildflowers. Based on findings from medieval excavations along the Camino, such as the preserved soles from French pilgrim sites, these boots were reinforced with hobnails for grip, their design a testament to the blend of necessity and ingenuity. In the golden hours of afternoon, when the sun warmed the leather to a comforting glow, pilgrims paused to adjust their laces, feeling the earth's pulse through the worn material. Yet, amid these tangible relics, a gentle mystery wove through the narratives of old, like a thread lost in the tapestry of time. Whispers of forgotten gear designs, perhaps carried by winds from distant workshops, hinted at innovations that vanished with the ages. Artifacts from the Camino, such as fragmented leather fragments and enigmatic carvings on roadside stones, suggest that some pilgrims bore amulets or pouches with intricate patterns, now faded beyond recognition. One might imagine a clever clasp, etched with symbols of protection, that adjusted to the wearer's stride, its mechanism as elusive as a dream upon waking. In a detached tone, one notes how such designs, possibly influenced by Moorish traders or Celtic craftsmen, slipped into obscurity, their secrets buried under centuries of soil and forgetfulness. This enigma, distinct from the clamor of daily life or sacred abodes, lent a subtle wit to the journey, a reminder that even the most practical tools held echoes of the unknown, much like stars fading at dawn. As the day progressed, the pilgrims' wide-brimmed hats, often straw or felt, shielded their eyes from the sun's benevolent gaze. These hats, lightweight and breezy, fluttered at the edges with the passage of wind, carrying scents of pine and wild thyme from the surrounding hills. Historical depictions in illuminated manuscripts from Camino archives show similar headwear, adorned with a simple feather or cord, serving as both protection and a mark of fellowship. The hat's brim cast a soft shadow over the face, creating a cocoon of calm, where the world's edges blurred into a peaceful haze. In moments of rest, beneath an ancient oak, the hat might be tilted back, allowing the cooling air to brush against skin still warm from the march. Accessories, though few, added layers to this portable world. A rosary of wooden beads strung on a cord that clicked softly with each swing of the arm provided a tactile mantra for reflection. The beads, smoothed by devout fingers, carried the faint oil of hands that had held them before, a sensory link to the collective spirit of the pilgrimage. Camino relics, like those discovered in Spanish monasteries, reveal beads carved from local olive wood, their designs simple yet profound. And then there were the water skins, fashioned from goat skin, their stoppers corked tight against evaporation. The slosh of liquid within offered a soothing counterpoint to the staff's taps, a promise of refreshment in the arid stretches, where dust rose like fine mist. In the evening's embrace, as shadows lengthened and the air grew crisp with the promise of night, the gear took on a new quietude. The cloak, now heavy with the day's dew, wrapped around the pilgrim like a second skin, while the staff leaned against a wayside cross, its wood cooling in the twilight. Here, in the realm of half-dreams, one could ponder the lost designs once more, the elusive belts with hidden compartments or cloaks woven with threads that shifted colors in the moonlight. These mysteries, drawn from the faint outlines in Camino artifacts, added a whimsical layer to the tale, a subtle nod to the ingenuity that time had claimed. Through it all, the sensory world enveloped the travelers. The gritty feel of path dust on fingertips, the metallic tang of a flask's rim against lips, the distant bleat of sheep echoing across valleys. Each element of their gear, from the staff's reliable grip to the cloak's enveloping fold, wove a narrative of resilience and wonder. As the stars began to pierce the darkening sky, the pilgrims pressed on, their equipment a silent testament to journeys endured. And so, with the trail's gentle call fading into the night, we turn our thoughts to the roads yet to unfold, where new stories await in the quiet dawn. As the sun dipped low over the rolling hills of 13th century Europe, casting long shadows across ancient paths, weary pilgrims in their woolen cloaks gathered at the edges of the world they knew. These travelers, drawn by faith and the promise of distant shrines, paused in their journeys to embrace the quiet ritual of rest. In that fading light, the air grew cool and fragrant with the scent of damp earth and wild herbs, a gentle prelude to the night's embrace. Here, amid the whispers of wind through the trees, they sought shelter, not in grand halls, but in humble abodes that dotted the roadside places of simple respite, where the body could surrender to sleep and the soul could wander in dreams. The shelters themselves were a quiet enigma, their designs lost to the mists of time, unrecorded in the annals that chronicled grander tales. Unlike the sturdy monasteries or fortified inns that might appear in travelers' tales, these roadside havens were often makeshift, pieced together from what nature and necessity provided. A pilgrim from the accounts of Brother Gerald of Wales might have described them as little more than lean-tos of woven branches and thatch, their forms varying with each locale, yet always functional in their modesty. No scribe had fully captured their intricacies, leaving behind a mystery that lingers like a half-forgotten melody. Were they circular, to ward off the chill winds of the Alps, or rectangular, mimicking the simple huts of rural folk? One could imagine the possibilities. For in the absence of detailed drawings, these shelters became canvases for the imagination, their unassuming structures holding secrets of survival that echoed through the centuries. As evening settled, the pilgrims would ease their burdens, letting heavy cloaks woven with threads of earthy brown and gray fall about their shoulders like protective shrouds. The fabric rustled softly against the straw-strewn floors, a sound as soothing as a distant stream, inviting the mind to drift. They moved with deliberate care, their steps muffled by the soft, yielding ground beneath, perhaps a bed of fallen leaves or packed earth, smoothed by countless feet before them. In these moments, the routine of rest unfolded like a lullaby, each action a verse in the song of the road. A traveler might lean against a weathered post, feeling the cool wood grain under calloused fingers, while another arranged a pile of straw into a makeshift pillow, its dry stalks whispering with every adjustment, a gentle crackle that blended with the night's symphony. The air inside these shelters carried a tapestry of scents. The musty aroma of aged timber mingled with the faint herbal tang of wild thyme crushed underfoot, all woven together by the subtle smoke of a dying fire outside. Pilgrims from the writings of the anonymous wayfarer of Compostela spoke of such evenings, where the warmth of shared company eased the ache of miles traveled. They would settle in clusters, their bodies forming a quiet constellation on the floor, each one a star in the darkness. Soft snores soon emerged, like the low hum of a lute string plucked in the distance, rising and falling in rhythmic waves that lulled the group into a communal trance. One might hear the occasional sigh, a breath released from lungs heavy with the day's toil, or the faint rustle of a cloak shifting in the night breeze, as if the fabric itself dreamed of home. In this repose, the pilgrims found a fragile peace, their minds drifting to the sacred sites that pulled them onward. Perhaps the grand cathedral at Canterbury, or the holy paths to Santiago de Compostela. Yet, as recorded in the sparse journals of those who walked these routes, rest was not merely sleep. It was a practice honed by necessity and tradition. They positioned themselves with care, turning away from the drafts that slipped through cracks in the walls, where the chill might nip at exposed skin like a playful ghost. The straw beneath them offered a yielding bed, its texture a mix of prickly stems and softer chaff, cradling the body in a way that spoke of earth's gentle bounty. And in the darkness, the occasional owl's hoot from beyond the shelter added a layer of mystery, a reminder that the world outside continued its watchful vigil. Subtle wit often flavored these resting hours. As pilgrims shared murmured jests in hushed tones, their voices a soft counterpoint to the night's stillness. "Ah, this bed of straw," one might quip with a knowing smile, "fit for kings in disguise, or perhaps for us humble souls pretending to be so." Such light-hearted exchanges, drawn from the oral traditions preserved in later chronicles, served to ease the weight of uncertainty, transforming weariness into a shared amusement. Yet, even in these moments of levity, there lingered an undercurrent of the unknown, for the shelter's designs remained an unsolved puzzle. Why were they built so variably, some with slanted roofs to shed rain, others with open sides to catch the breeze? Accounts from the pilgrim diaries of the period, like those attributed to the lesser-known traveler of the Rhine, hinted at local ingenuity, where villagers might add a stone wall or a thatched overhang based on regional needs, but never fully explain the patterns. As the hours deepened, sensory details wove a cocoon around the sleepers. The faint glow of embers from a nearby fire cast flickering shadows on the walls, painting ephemeral dances that played across closed eyelids. One could almost feel the cool night air brushing against the face, carrying with it the distant scent of blooming night flowers, their petals unfurling in silent bloom. The soft exhalations of fellow travelers created a harmonious rhythm, like the gentle rise and fall of waves on a tranquil sea, each breath a testament to the body's resilience. In these shelters, the pilgrims embodied a quiet resilience, their rest a deliberate act of preservation amid the hardships of the road. Historical examples from authenticated accounts enrich this portrait of repose. The writings of Abbot Suger, though focused on architecture, indirectly illuminate the simplicity of such resting places through descriptions of monastic hospitality extended to wayfarers. Similarly, fragments from the Pilgrim narratives collected in the Liber Sancti Jacobi offer glimpses into how travelers in the 13th century adapted to their environments. One such account recalls a group bedding down in a wayside chapel, where the stone floor was softened by layers of rushes, their earthy fragrance mingling with the faint, sacred scent of incense from earlier devotions. These details, preserved in the margins of history, underscore the ingenuity born of necessity, where rest became an art of improvisation. Yet, amid the calm, there were whispers of the unforeseen. A sudden rustle in the straw might startle a sleeper, only to reveal a harmless mouse scurrying away, its tiny paws a fleeting interruption in the night's symphony. Or a distant howl might echo through the darkness, a reminder of the wild edges of the civilized world, handled with a detached acknowledgement of nature's vastness. Such events, as noted in the understated prose of medieval itineraries, were met not with alarm, but with a resigned acceptance, focusing on the aftermath, the return to slumber, the body sinking deeper into its bed of improvised comfort. As dawn approached, the pilgrims stirred gently, their awakening as gradual as the light creeping over the horizon. The mystery of the shelters lingered in their thoughts, a quiet companion to their reflections, urging them to ponder the unseen hands that had crafted these havens. In this way, rest was not an end but a bridge, preparing them for the paths ahead. And so, with the first birdsong piercing the air like a soft alarm, they rose, cloaks in hand, ready to continue their sacred voyage, leaving behind the ephemeral traces of their night's repose. This gentle interlude, woven from the threads of history and the senses, transitions now to the morrow's trials, where the road calls once more with its timeless whisper. In the soft hush of a 13th century evening, along the winding paths of the Camino de Santiago, a group of pilgrims gathered as twilight draped the countryside in shades of deepening blue. Cloaked figures, their woolen robes frayed from miles of dusty trails, formed a circle around a modest campfire that crackled with gentle rhythm. The air carried the earthy scent of damp soil and wild herbs, mingling with the warm aroma of bread toasting on iron skewers. These travelers, drawn from distant corners of Europe, farmers from England, merchants from France, and artisans from Germany, shared not just their provisions, but the invisible threads of fellowship that bound them through hardship and wonder. The fire's glow painted their faces in flickering gold, softening the lines etched by days of walking under relentless sun and occasional rain. One man, his cloak patched with leather from a village near the Pyrenees, turned a loaf over the flames, the sizzling fat from rendered lard creating a melody of pops and hisses that drew soft smiles from his companions. "Ah, this bread," he murmured with a hint of wit. "Baked in the morning and now kissed by fire, it's as if the road itself seasons our meals." His words elicited chuckles, light as the flutter of night birds overhead, reminding them that even in weariness, humor could weave its quiet magic. These pilgrims, as recorded in the ancient codices of the Camino, often found strength in such gatherings. The Liber Sancti Jacobi, a revered collection of pilgrim accounts from that era, speaks of how strangers would pause at wayside camps to break bread, forging bonds that sustained them through the perils ahead. A woman with a staff carved from oak sat cross-legged, her hands cradling a simple wooden bowl of stewed roots and herbs. The steam rose like a whispered secret, carrying notes of garlic and thyme that evoked memories of home. She offered a spoonful to her neighbor, a young scribe from Italy whose eyes reflected the fire's dance. "Take this," she said, her voice a calm murmur, "for the road takes more than it gives, and we must give to one another." In that exchange, the mystery of unwritten friendships began to unfold, a silent pact formed not in grand halls or official scrolls, but in these fleeting moments that history seldom captured. As the night deepened, the camp buzzed with the low hum of shared stories, each tale a thread in the tapestry of their collective journey. The scribe, his fingers ink-stained from copying psalms in roadside chapels, recounted a legend from the Camino's archives, how a group of pilgrims once aided a fallen companion through a storm-swept pass, their unity born from nothing more than a shared glance and a helping hand. The air grew fragrant with the scent of brewing herbal tea, leaves steeped in a battered pot that bubbled softly, releasing vapors of chamomile and mint that soothed tired minds. Laughter drifted like smoke, soft and unhurried, as another traveler, a weaver from Flanders, described the feel of his cloak against the chill, woven from threads as varied as the people around him. "We are like this fabric," he said with subtle irony, "pulled together by the loom of the road, stronger for the knots we tie." Yet, amid the warmth, there lingered an unspoken mystery, the enigma of friendships that blossomed and faded like the evening stars. The Camino records, such as those in the Pilgrim's Guide from the 12th century, hint at these ephemeral connections, alliances formed over shared hardships, only to dissolve as paths diverged. One might share a meal with a fellow traveler, their laughter echoing under the vast sky, only for that companion to vanish into the morning mist, their story unwritten in any ledger. It was a bond as intangible as the cool breeze that rustled the leaves nearby, carrying the distant howl of a wolf that added a touch of wild serenity to the night. No official scribe noted these ties, for they existed in the realm of unspoken understanding, a quiet defiance against the solitude of the pilgrimage. The fire's embers glowed brighter as they passed around a flask of watered wine, its tart sweetness cutting through the richness of their meal. Sensory details from the era's accounts paint vivid pictures. The satisfying crunch of crusty bread, still warm from the flames, and the gentle crackle of twigs that provided a rhythmic backdrop to their conversations. A child among them, perhaps the ward of a widowed pilgrim, gazed wide-eyed at the stars, her small hands warmed by the fire's heat. "Tell me of the friends we've made," she whispered, prompting tales of kindnesses exchanged a shared blanket against the dew, or a word of encouragement on steep inclines. These acts, drawn from historical fragments like the Codex Calixtinus, illustrated how community bonds were the unseen pillars of the pilgrimage, fostering resilience without the need for formal oaths. In the calm of the night, the group's unity revealed itself in subtle ways, far removed from the daily toils or structured routines that might occupy other aspects of their lives. One pilgrim, a stonemason from Normandy, described the weight of his pack as a metaphor for burdens shared, his voice steady and soothing like a lullaby. "We carry not just stones for the path," he mused, "but the stories of those who walk with us, easing the load with every shared word." The air filled with the scent of pine resin from the surrounding woods, its resinous tang blending with the fading aroma of their meal, creating a cocoon of tranquility. Soft laughter punctuated the darkness, light-hearted and wise, as they recalled a humorous mishap from earlier that day, a slipped boot in a muddy stream that had them all aiding one another, their cloaks muddied, but spirits lifted. As the hours waned, the mystery deepened. How could such profound connections arise from mere chance encounters? The Camino's lore, preserved in medieval manuscripts, offers glimpses but no clear answers, leaving room for wonder. Perhaps it was the shared vulnerability of the road, where each step reminded them of mortality's gentle pull, that forged these unwritten pacts. A detached observer might note the consequences of such bonds, safer passages through bandit-plagued regions, or the quiet solace in moments of doubt without delving into the grimmer details that could disrupt the night's peace. The fire's warmth enveloped them, the soft glow illuminating faces relaxed in camaraderie, as the distant hoot of an owl added a layer of natural harmony. They lingered, savoring the moment, with the taste of honeyed herbs lingering on their tongues, and the feel of the earth's cool grasp beneath them. Historical examples from the period, like the accounts in the Guide for Pilgrims, emphasize how these gatherings fostered a sense of collective identity, binding individuals across social divides. A knight from Aquitaine, his armor set aside for the journey, shared a wry observation. In these circles, a king and a beggar might swap tales as equals, for the road knows no titles. His words, delivered with understated wit, drew nods and soft exhalations, the fire's light dancing in their eyes like fireflies in the summer air. As the embers began to fade, casting long shadows that whispered of approaching dawn, the pilgrims prepared for rest. The mystery of their unwritten friendships lingered like the last wisps of smoke, a testament to bonds that endured beyond the flame. One by one, they wrapped themselves in their cloaks, the fabric soft against skin, weary from the day's trek, and drifted into dreams under a canopy of stars. Yet, as the night yielded to the promise of morning, thoughts turned gently toward the paths that lay ahead, where new faces might join the circle and the cycle of connection continue. In the quiet aftermath, the essence of their community bonds remained, a soothing reminder that even in the vast expanse of history, some ties need no words to endure. And so, as the first light crept over the horizon, the story of these pilgrims eased into the next chapter, where the road would reveal its next secrets. In the hushed dawn of a 13th century European road, where mist clung to ancient oaks like a lover's whisper, pilgrims emerged from the shadows, their woolen cloaks draped heavily against the chill. These travelers, faces etched with quiet resolve, moved with a rhythm as old as the stones beneath their feet, drawn by an unseen pull towards sacred sites scattered across the land. In this world of fading stars and rising sun, their journey was a tapestry of devotion, woven from the threads of faith and the subtle mysteries that lingered in the air. Each pilgrim carried the weight of their vows in simple garb, hoods pulled low to shield against both wind and worldly eyes. A man in a frayed cloak, perhaps a blacksmith from the lowlands, paused at a roadside shrine, a modest alcove in the rock, adorned with a weathered cross and faint carvings of saints. He knelt, his knees pressing into the damp earth, and drew forth a small vial of holy water, its surface rippling like a distant memory. The air carried the faint, sweet scent of incense wisps that had been left burning by some unseen hand, a lingering perfume that spoke of prayers offered in the night. Soft chants rose from his lips, not the booming hymns of a cathedral, but gentle murmurs that blended with the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a morning lark, creating a symphony of solace that eased the soul. These practices, rooted in the annals of medieval church records from abbeys like those at Canterbury and Cluny, formed the backbone of a pilgrim's day. As documented in the chronicles of figures such as the monk Matthew Paris, who noted the faithful's routines in his Historia Anglorum, pilgrims rose with the first light to perform their devotions. They would face east, toward the rising sun, symbolizing the resurrection, and recite the Pater Noster or Ave Maria in rhythmic repetition. The words flowed like a stream over pebbles, their cadence hypnotic and calming, a soft chant that wrapped around the heart like a warm shawl. One could almost feel the cool breeze carrying the echoes, mingling with the earthy aroma of dew-kissed grass and the subtle spice of wild herbs crushed underfoot. At such shrines, hidden along forgotten paths, the pilgrims engaged in rituals that blended the official rites of the church with personal touches, passed down through generations yet seldom inscribed in the great tomes. A woman, her cloak embroidered with faint threads of pilgrimage badges from distant abbeys, might light a taper candle, its flame flickering like a guarded secret in the gray light. The warmth of the wax melting in her palm evoked a sense of continuity, connecting her to the countless souls who had knelt there before. Incense, perhaps smuggled from Eastern trades, as noted in the records of Venetian merchants and church inventories, curled upward in lazy spirals, filling the air with a resinous fragrance that hinted at far-off lands and divine favor. These moments were not hurried. They unfolded with the patience of a river carving stone, each breath a quiet affirmation of faith. Yet amid these observable customs, there dwelled the mystery of unwritten rituals, those elusive practices that slipped through the fingers of history like smoke from a dying fire. Church records, such as the decretals of Pope Innocent III or the accounts from monastic scribes, captured the formalities, penances, blessings, and processions, but left gaps where personal devotions flourished. A pilgrim might trace an invisible cross upon the shrine's stone, a gesture learned from a grandmother's tale rather than a priest's instruction, its meaning known only to the heart. This enigma, untouched by the ink of chroniclers, added a layer of intrigue to the journey, a subtle wit in the way faith adapted like a river finding new paths. One could imagine the soft patter of rosary beads, their polished wood warm against calloused fingers, as pilgrims whispered invocations that varied from one traveler to the next, each a unique thread in the fabric of belief. As the day progressed, the pilgrims continued their trek, stopping at wayside chapels or simple stone markers that dotted the landscape. Here they might encounter a hermit, his voice a gentle rumble like distant thunder, offering words of guidance drawn from the lives of saints as recorded in the Golden Legend by Jacobus de Voragine. The hermit's presence brought a sensory richness to the rituals, the crisp bite of autumn air mingling with the musty scent of aged parchments he carried, and the faint melodic hum of a psalter recited in Latin. These encounters were moments of renewal, where pilgrims paused to wash their faces in a nearby stream, the water's cool touch awakening a sense of purity before resuming their prayers with renewed vigor. In the evenings, as shadows lengthened and the world grew still, the practices took on a more introspective tone. Under the vast canopy of stars, pilgrims gathered in small clearings, their cloaks pooling around them like pools of ink. They recited the canonical hours, such as Vespers, their voices blending in a harmonious whisper that carried across the fields. The air, heavy with the day's accumulated scents, earthy loam, fading incense, and the subtle sweetness of wildflowers created an atmosphere of tranquil reflection. One pilgrim, perhaps a weaver from the Flemish towns, might kneel alone, her hands folded in a gesture not found in the official liturgies, drawing upon an inner well of devotion that historians like those at the Abbey of Saint Denis could only speculate about. This mystery of the unwritten, a gentle enigma that teased the edges of recorded faith, lent a poetic depth to their world, a reminder that not all sacred acts needed words to endure. Through these daily observances, the Pilgrims embodied the essence of 13th century spirituality, as evidenced in the meticulous notes of church councils and pilgrimage guides like the Miracula Sancti Tomai. They fasted before major devotions, their stomachs growling softly in the quiet, a physical echo of spiritual hunger, and partook of simple meals, barley bread and watered wine, that sustained both body and soul. The cloak, ever present, served as more than mere protection. It was a canvas for the journey's marks, its fabric absorbing the day's scents and stories, from the resinous smoke of a shrine censer to the fresh rain on mossy stones. Yet, even in the serenity, there were whispers of hardship, handled with a detached grace. The records speak of weary feet and relentless weather, not as tales of woe, but as natural consequences that tested resolve, leading to deeper communion. A pilgrim might reflect on such trials during a midnight vigil, the cool night air brushing against their skin like a consoling hand, transforming fatigue into a form of prayer. As the moon arched high, casting a silver glow on the path ahead, the pilgrims prepared for rest, their rituals ebbing into silence. They might end with a final benediction, a soft chant that faded like a lullaby into the night, leaving the air tinged with the lingering essence of their devotions. In this cycle of faith, the mystery of those unwritten practices remained a cherished secret, a subtle wit in the grand design of belief, inviting each traveler to add their own verse to the eternal song. And so, as the first light of another day beckoned, the pilgrims rose once more, their cloaks stirring in the breeze, ready to continue their sacred wanderings, leading, perhaps, to tales yet to unfold. In the soft hush of a 13th century evening, where the sun dipped low over the rolling hills of Europe, pilgrims gathered in their woolen cloaks, the fabric heavy with the day's dust and whispers of distant shrines. These travelers, bound by faith and the ache of long journeys, paused in makeshift camps along ancient paths like the Via Francigena or the roads to Santiago. Here, amid the flicker of a modest fire, they turned to the earth's quiet gifts, herbs plucked from wayside meadows to tend to their weary bodies. The air carried a gentle steam from brewing pots, where chamomile and sage mingled, their earthy scents weaving through the twilight like a lullaby for the soul. The pilgrims, faces shadowed under hoods that rustled with each breath, knew the value of these plants not from scholarly tomes alone, but from generations of shared wisdom. Drawing from texts like those of the School of Salerno or the herbal insights of Hildegard of Bingen, they prepared simple remedies that eased the toll of travel. A handful of rosemary, its needles sharp yet fragrant, might be crushed and bound to a blistered foot, the oil seeping into sore skin with a warmth that soothed like a mother's touch. The steam rising from heated water infused with lavender curled around their faces, carrying the faint, sweet tang that promised rest without the depths of slumber. In these moments, the camp transformed into a sanctuary, where the rustle of cloaks against the ground echoed the careful rhythm of healing hands. One traveler, perhaps a merchant's wife turned pilgrim, would kneel by the fire, her fingers deft as they selected feverfew leaves, their bitter aroma cutting through the cooler night air. This herb, praised in medieval manuscripts for quelling headaches born of exertion, was steeped in a clay cup. The liquid sipped slowly to ward off the day's fatigue. The process held a ritual grace, each step deliberate, as if the plants themselves whispered ancient secrets. Sensory details abounded. The cool, velvety feel of mint leaves against the palm, the subtle crackle of dried thyme being ground between stones, and the way the firelight danced on droplets of dew that clung to gathered stalks. These practices, rooted in the humoral theory of Galen and Avicenna, sought balance in the body, cooling overheated blood with cool herbs, or warming chilled limbs with spicy infusions. Yet, amid this careful tending, a mystery lingered like mist over the trails. Whispers passed among the cloaked figures of remedies long lost, recipes once scribed in fading illuminations that had vanished with the sack of monasteries or the drift of forgotten scrolls. One such enigma involved a blend of wild yarrow and elderflower, said to have healed the invisible wounds of the spirit, those unseen ailments that made the heart heavy on the road. According to tales drawn from the Physica of Hildegard, this potion could lift the fog of melancholy, but its precise proportions had slipped into obscurity, carried away by time's gentle erosion. The pilgrims spoke of it in hushed tones, their voices carrying a subtle wit, as if the herbs themselves played a coy game, revealing their powers only to the most patient seeker. Ah, if only the wind hadn't scattered those pages, one might murmur with a faint smile, the words floating like the steam from their brews. In the camps, the practice extended to communal rituals, where groups would circle the fire, sharing knowledge as freely as the herbs they foraged. A young squire, his cloak patched from miles of travel, might demonstrate the use of comfrey root, its mucilaginous texture forming a poultice from minor scrapes, the earthy scent grounding him like the soil beneath his feet. The air, thick with the herbal haze, invited a calming rhythm to their evenings, each breath drawing in the piney notes of juniper or the floral whisper of meadowsweet. These methods, verified through the empirical observations in De Vegetabilibus by Albertus Magnus, emphasized prevention over cure, teaching pilgrims to fortify their constitutions against the rigors of the path. Sensory layers deepened with each preparation. The warm, enveloping vapor of a sage infusion, inhaled to clear the lungs of road dust, or the slight sting of nettle leaves, handled with care to avoid irritation yet valued for their purifying effects. The cloaks, draped like second skins, absorbed these aromas, carrying the essence of the herbs long after the fire dimmed. In this way, the pilgrims embodied a living pharmacopoeia, their journeys not just spiritual, but a testament to the intricate dance between body and nature. Subtle wit emerged in their banter, as one traveler quipped about how the persistent aroma of garlic, used to bolster the heart, might keep both ailments and unwanted company at bay. As the night deepened, the mystery of the lost recipes wove through their conversations, a thread of intrigue that added a dreamlike quality to their gatherings. They pondered the fate of a legendary elixir, perhaps derived from the writings of Constantine the African, which combined rose hips and fennel to restore vigor after days of dusty trails. Its formula, once guarded in monastic scriptoria, had faded, leaving only echoes in oral tradition's fragments that hinted at a balance of sweet and bitter flavors capable of mending the subtle fractures of endurance. The pilgrims, with their detached reflections, marveled at how such knowledge could evaporate like morning dew, yet they found solace in the herbs still within reach, their scents a bridge to the past. Through it all, the practices remained a gentle art, far removed from the clamor of daily life or the simple act of repose. Instead, they focused on the body's resilience, using hyssop to cleanse and strengthen, its minty sharpness cutting through the evening's calm. The feel of the herb's smooth calendula petals or the rough bark of willow twigs became a tactile poetry, each texture telling a story of healing drawn from the Ticunum Sanitatis, a guide to health that celebrated the virtues of moderation and nature's bounty. In these camps, the pilgrims' health rituals fostered a sense of unity, their cloaks swaying like leaves in the breeze as they shared poultices and infusions. The mystery of the vanished recipes, with its subtle allure, reminded them that not all wisdom could be grasped, lending a poignant depth to their endeavors. As the fire's glow softened into embers, the air still perfumed with herbal steam, they prepared for the morrow, their bodies fortified and spirits lifted, ready to continue the eternal pilgrimage. Yet even as the night enveloped them, the promise of further discoveries lingered, drawing the mind gently toward the paths yet to unfold. In the hushed dawn of a 13th century European trail, where mist clung to ancient paths like a gentle shroud, young souls stirred among the pilgrim families. These children, small figures in woolen cloaks that whispered against their knees, moved with a quiet purpose through the rolling landscapes of France or the rugged hills of Spain. Their roles, woven into the fabric of the journey, were as essential as the stars guiding the night, yet often overlooked in the annals of history. Imagine them now, little ones with water skins slung over their shoulders, their soft footsteps padding on dew-kissed earth, the faint splash of liquid echoing like a distant lullaby. In those days, when families undertook the sacred treks to shrines like Santiago de Compostela or Canterbury, children bore responsibilities that shaped the rhythm of the pilgrimage. A boy of 7 or 8, his cloak frayed at the edges from the trail's embrace, might be tasked with fetching water from a trickling stream, his small hands gripping the cool, damp leather of the vessel. The water sloshed rhythmically as he walked, a soothing sound that mingled with the rustle of leaves overhead, reminding all of the earth's quiet generosity. Girls no older than 10 carried similar burdens, their cloaks drawn close against the morning chill, the fabric soft and worn from many washes in riverbeds. They moved in a line, their steps synchronized like the beat of a distant drum. Each drop they preserved a thread in the tapestry of survival. Historical accounts, such as those from the Pilgrim diaries of the period, paint a picture of these young helpers as the unseen guardians of the group's needs. In the writings of travelers like the anonymous chronicler of the Cistercian order, we glimpse children gathering wild herbs along the wayside, their fingers brushing against the velvety petals of blooming thyme, releasing a faint, earthy scent that lingered in the air. One such account describes a child in a simple cloak, no more than a scrap of dyed wool, carefully filling a wooden cup from a spring, the water's cool touch a brief relief against sun-warmed skin. These tasks were not mere chores. They were acts of quiet devotion, ensuring that the family's strength endured through long days of walking. Yet there was a tenderness in their duties, a subtle wit in how these young ones navigated the world. Picture a girl with braids tucked under her hood, balancing a small pail of water on her hip as she skipped over a root-strewn path, her laughter a soft ripple like the stream she drew from. She might pause to watch a butterfly dance in the breeze, its wings fluttering with the same delicate grace as her cloak in the wind, before resuming her task with a knowing smile, as if sharing a secret with the natural world. The children learned early that their roles demanded both strength and subtlety, carrying water not just for drinking, but for soothing blistered feet at day's end, the liquid's gentle splash against tired limbs, a balm in the fading light. As the families traversed forests and meadows, the children's contributions extended beyond the immediate. A boy might scout ahead for safe campsites, his keen eyes spotting the shimmer of a hidden brook, its waters murmuring softly through the underbrush. In the soft glow of evening, he would return, cloak dusted with pollen from the wildflowers he passed, to share his findings. These moments, described in fragments from medieval manuscripts like those of the Pilgrim Gerald of Wales, reveal how children helped maintain the group's harmony, their small forms blending into the landscape like shadows at twilight. The sensory world enveloped them, the crisp bite of autumn air on their cheeks, the muffled thud of their footsteps on packed earth, the faint, sweet aroma of pine needles crushed underfoot. One cannot overlook the mystery that shrouds the unrecorded tasks of these pilgrim children, an enigma as elusive as the mist that veiled the morning trails. While accounts from figures like the 13th century traveler Jacques de Vitry detail the visible roles fetching water, tending to younger siblings, or even mending cloaks with nimble fingers. There linger whispers of duties lost to time. Perhaps they whispered prayers over the water they carried, their voices a soft murmur blending with the stream's flow, imbuing the liquid with a spiritual essence that historians never noted. Or maybe, in the quiet hours before dawn, they crafted small talismans from twigs and feathers, their tiny hands weaving protection for the family's path, a ritual as gentle as the wind through the grass. This mystery adds a layer of intrigue, a subtle puzzle that invites us to imagine the unseen. The soft rustle of a cloak as a child hid away to perform a secret act of care, the faint scent of crushed lavender they might have tucked into a parent's pack for comfort. In expanding upon these roles, we draw from the rich tapestry of historical examples, ensuring accuracy while weaving in the sensory details that bring the past alive. Consider the feel of a water skin, cool and slightly yielding against a child's chest, its weight a constant, reassuring presence as they navigated sloping trails. The sound of pebbles shifting under their feet, a delicate crunch like the cracking of dry leaves, echoed the pilgrimage's steady progress. Even in moments of hardship, such as when rains turned the paths to mud, the children persevered with a detached resolve, their cloaks heavy with dampness, the earthy smell of wet soil rising around them. They might have paused to wring out the fabric, the water dripping in a rhythmic patter, a small act that spoke of endurance without dwelling on the discomfort. Through it all, the children's roles fostered a sense of quiet guardianship. A girl carrying water could be seen as a miniature sentinel, her steps light and purposeful, the liquid inside sloshing with a sound like a distant wave, reminding the group of nature's cycles. Boys, too, took on tasks that blended utility with wonder, perhaps identifying edible berries along the way, their fingers stained with the juice's tart sweetness, a subtle wit in their ability to turn foraging into a game. These duties, as noted in the sparse but vivid records of Pilgrim poets, were performed with an innate grace, their cloaks swaying like pendulums in the breeze, marking time on the eternal road. As the sun dipped low, casting a golden haze over the trails, the children settled into their places, their small cloaks folded neatly as they rested. The mystery of their unrecorded tasks lingers, like the fading echo of footsteps on a forgotten path, inviting reflection on the hidden depths of childhood in those bygone eras. Yet, even as we ponder these enigmas, we turn our gaze forward, to the broader tapestry of pilgrim life that awaits exploration in the tales to come. In the hush of a 13th century evening, as the sun dipped behind the rolling hills of Europe, weary pilgrims found respite in the sturdy embrace of stone hospices along ancient paths. These sanctuaries, scattered like quiet guardians along routes such as the Camino de Santiago, welcomed travelers with walls of weathered granite and roofs that whispered of distant quarries. Cloaked figures, their hoods drawn against the chill, gathered in dim chambers where the air carried the faint scent of damp earth and flickering tallow candles. Here, amid the soft creak of wooden benches and the gentle patter of rain on slate tiles, the world slowed to a lullaby of rest and reflection. The hospices themselves were humble abodes, built not for splendor but for solace. Their designs drawn from practical wisdom passed through generations of builders. Archaeological reports from the Camino excavations reveal structures that blended Romanesque simplicity with local ingenuity, featuring thick walls that held the day's warmth long into the night. Imagine a pilgrim, perhaps a merchant from distant Flanders or a penitent from the Loire Valley, easing onto a rough-hewn bench. His cloak, heavy with the dust of miles traveled, rustled softly as he settled, the fabric brushing against the cool stone floor. The room glowed with the warm, golden light of candles set in iron holders, their flames dancing lazily and casting elongated shadows that played across arched ceilings. Each flicker brought a subtle rhythm, like the breath of the earth itself, soothing the soul weary from the road. In these shelters, the pilgrims formed a quiet community, their voices merging into a low murmur that echoed faintly off the walls. One might hear the soft clink of a wooden bowl as a volunteer, often a local monk or lay brother, distributed simple fare barley broth warmed over a hearth, its steam rising with the aroma of herbs gathered from nearby fields. The scent mingled with that of oiled leather from boots drying by the fire, and the occasional crackle of burning logs added a comforting counterpoint to the silence. Historical accounts, pieced together from Camino artifacts, speak of these routines as acts of quiet charity, where no one questioned the stranger's tale, only offered a place to lay down the burdens of the day. Yet, there was a mystery woven into the very fabric of these hospices, a puzzle that archaeological digs have only begun to unravel. The lost designs of these shelters, as revealed in reports from sites like the ruins near Puente la Reina, hinted at innovations long vanished from memory. Builders in the 13th century employed techniques that allowed for efficient heating through cleverly placed vents, drawing warm air from central hearths to chase away the alpine chills or the damp fogs of the Pyrenees. These features, etched faintly on fragments of stone tablets unearthed in recent decades, suggest a sophistication that time has eroded. One can almost feel the intrigue in the air, as if the stones themselves held secrets, perhaps a forgotten pattern of interlocking arches that maximize space without sacrificing warmth, or hidden alcoves where travelers left tokens of their journeys, now lost to erosion and oversight. As night deepened, the pilgrims would lie on straw-stuffed pallets, their bodies sinking into the yielding layers with a sigh of relief. The air grew heavy with the earthy smell of the bedding, mingled with traces of rosemary sprinkled for freshness, a touch that archaeological evidence attributes to the hospice's caretakers. A gentle breeze might slip through narrow windows, carrying the distant hoot of an owl or the rustle of leaves outside, creating a symphony of sounds that lulled the mind into peaceful contemplation. In this calm, subtle wit emerged in shared whispers. A pilgrim might jest softly about his aching feet, comparing them to the stubborn roots of an ancient oak, drawing chuckles that faded like echoes in a cave. The sensory tapestry of these shelters was rich and enveloping. The creak of wooden doors, swollen from autumn rains, spoke of the passage of countless souls before. Candlelight played tricks on the eyes, turning simple tapestries into flickering stories of saints and stars, their threads worn smooth by time. One could almost taste the cool mineral tang of water drawn from a nearby well, a detail corroborated by Camino water systems uncovered in medieval sites, where channels carved into stone ensured a steady flow for weary throats. The warmth from the hearth radiated outward, a gentle heat that seeped into bones, chilled by days of walking through misty valleys or sun-baked plains, offering a reprieve that felt almost sacred. Historical accuracy, as gleaned from those Camino reports, paints a picture of these hospices as more than mere buildings. They were threads in the fabric of medieval life, designed to foster community amid isolation. Excavations at places like the Hospital of St. John in Burgos have uncovered remnants of communal dining areas, where pilgrims shared not just meals but moments of quiet camaraderie. The stone floors, polished by generations of footsteps, held the imprints of those who came before, each mark a testament to journeys endured. Yet the mystery persists. Why were certain designs, such as the intricate drainage systems that kept interiors dry during relentless rains, never replicated or recorded in later chronicles? Perhaps the knowledge was guarded by the master builders, passed orally and lost when plagues or wars scattered communities. This enigma adds a layer of gentle intrigue, like a half-remembered dream that lingers upon waking. In the soft glow of dawn's approach, the pilgrims stirred, their movements deliberate and unhurried. The first light filtered through small, latticed windows, casting a pale hue over the room and illuminating motes of dust that danced in the air. The scent of baking bread from a nearby oven might drift in, a subtle promise of the day ahead, though the focus remained on the night's embrace. Here, in these stone havens, time unfolded like a slow river, carrying away the aches of travel and leaving behind a sense of renewal. To expand upon this scene, consider the tactile details unearthed from historical examples. The cloaks themselves, often woven from coarse wool treated with lanolin, carried a waxy texture that repelled dew, a fact drawn from textile fragments found along the Camino. As a pilgrim adjusted his wrap, the fabric's slight oiliness under his fingers evoked the sheep pastures of his homeland, a sensory bridge to memories left behind. Or picture the candles, made from beeswax sourced from local hives, their honeyed scent mingling with the room's musty air, a detail confirmed by apiary remnants at hospice sites. These elements, woven into the narrative, deepen the immersion, making the experience feel immediate and alive. The mystery of the lost designs takes on a poetic quality in this context. Archaeological reports from the Camino, such as those detailing the submerged foundations near the Ebro River, suggest that some hospices incorporated aquatic elements, perhaps submerged stone basins for ritual washing, now buried under centuries of sediment. This innovation, speculated to aid in spiritual cleansing, adds a layer of wonder, as if the buildings themselves were alive with forgotten rituals. Subtle wit creeps in here. One might imagine the builders chuckling over their clever contraptions, outsmarting the elements in ways that modern eyes can only envy. As the night waned, the pilgrim's breath slowed to a rhythmic cadence, the creaking wood settling into silence. In this tranquil space, the world outside faded, leaving only the soft symphony of rest. Yet, as the first hints of morning stirred, thoughts turned gently toward the paths ahead, where new shelters awaited and the journey continued its eternal dance. This moment, poised between repose and renewal, serves as a bridge to the stories yet to unfold. In the hushed twilight of 13th century Europe, where ancient roads wound like quiet rivers through forests and fields, pilgrims set forth under cloaks of coarse wool, their steps a gentle rhythm against the earth. These travelers, drawn by whispers of saints and sanctuaries, carried not only their burdens of faith, but also small pouches of alms, simple offerings meant to echo the divine call to charity. The air carried the faint scent of damp leaves and wood smoke as figures paused along the wayside to share bread with the needy, their gestures as soft as the fading light. In those moments, almsgiving became a sacred thread, weaving through the fabric of their journeys, unseen and unheralded by the grand chronicles of the time. The practice was rooted in the teachings of the Church, as recorded in the decretals of Pope Innocent III, and the sermons of mendicant friars like St. Francis, who emphasized the virtue of giving without expectation. Pilgrims, often weary from days of walking, would halt at wayside crosses or humble shrines, their cloaks drawn close against the chill. A loaf of barley bread, warm from the baker's oven in some distant village, would emerge from their satchels, its crust crumbling slightly under calloused fingers. The sound was subtle, a faint crackle that mingled with the rustle of leaves, as they broke off pieces to hand to beggars or wayfarers. These recipients, their faces lined with the hardships of the road, accepted with murmured thanks, voices low and melodic, like distant chants from a monastery bell. One could imagine a pilgrim named Elias, a wool merchant from Flanders turned seeker of grace, pausing at the edge of a forest clearing. The sun dipped low, casting a golden haze over the scene, and the air grew cool, carrying the earthy aroma of moss and wild herbs. Elias reached into his cloak, pulling out a small parcel wrapped in linen, the remnants of his midday meal. As he unwrapped it, the bread's surface flaked gently, releasing a warm, yeasty scent that seemed to invite the hungry closer. A group of villagers, their own stores depleted by a poor harvest, gathered with hesitant steps, their eyes reflecting the soft glow of the setting sun. Elias spoke not a word, for words were unnecessary in this ritual. Instead, he offered the bread with a nod, his movements deliberate and serene, as if performing a quiet liturgy. Such acts were not mere kindness, but a fulfillment of canonical obligations, as outlined in the Liber Extra of 1234, which urged the faithful to distribute alms as a means of spiritual purification. Pilgrims viewed their journeys to places like Canterbury or Santiago de Compostela as opportunities for penance, where every shared morsel atoned for earthly sins. The bread, often coarse and dense, had a texture that spoke of humble origins grains, ground by stone mills, baked in communal ovens that filled the air with a comforting warmth. When broken, it yielded a satisfying crumble, the fragments tumbling into outstretched palms like grains of sand on a peaceful shore. The recipient's fingers, weathered and worn, brushed against the pilgrims in a fleeting touch, evoking a sense of shared humanity, all under the vast, star-flecked sky. Yet, amid these tranquil exchanges, a quiet mystery lingered, one that the medieval church records only hinted at, the unrecorded logs of almsgiving. While great cathedrals like Chartres or Notre Dame kept meticulous tallies of tithes and endowments, the everyday acts of pilgrims often slipped into the shadows, undocumented in the official scripts. Scribes in monasteries, penning entries in illuminated manuscripts, focused on the grand donations of kings and nobles, leaving the small personal charities to fade like whispers in the wind. One might ponder, in the calm of night, how many loaves were given along forgotten paths, their givers anonymous, and their recipients unnamed. The mystery deepened with the realization that these acts, though pivotal to the pilgrim's faith, were seldom noted in texts like the Decretum Gratiani or the records of episcopal visitations. It was as if the very essence of almsgiving, its purity and spontaneity, resisted the ink and parchment, existing instead in the ephemeral realm of memory and spirit. In one such instance, a pilgrim woman from Normandy, clad in a cloak dyed the color of twilight, might have paused at a roadside spring, where the water trickled with a soothing murmur. The spring's cool mist rose gently, carrying the fresh scent of minerals and wildflowers, as she knelt to share her provisions. Her bread, still slightly warm from being carried against her body, had a soft, yielding center that contrasted with its crisp exterior. As she tore it apart, the action produced a faint, rhythmic sound, like the turning of pages in an ancient psalter. A child, ragged and wide-eyed, approached with tentative steps, and she placed a piece in his hand, the warmth transferring like a silent blessing. The boy's soft exhale of gratitude blended with the evening breeze, a melody that seemed to harmonize with the distant calls of nightingales. Historical accounts, such as those in the Cistercian chronicles, reveal that almsgiving was not confined to bread alone. Pilgrims often carried coins or simple goods, drawn from their own scant resources. A silver denier, cool and smooth to the touch, might change hands in the dim light of a wayside inn, its clink a subdued note against the wooden tables. Yet it was the bread that symbolized the most profound connection, evoking the Eucharist and the Last Supper, as described in the writings of Thomas Aquinas, in his Summa Theologica. The act of sharing it transformed ordinary sustenance into a sacred rite, where the crumbling texture and earthy taste served as reminders of mortality and divine grace. In the soft glow of a pilgrim's lantern, the scene unfolded with a lullaby-like rhythm, each gesture a verse in an unwritten hymn. As the nights grew longer and the roads quieter, pilgrims continued their practices with a subtle wit, perhaps chuckling inwardly at the irony of their hidden generosity. For in an era where every relic and indulgence was catalogued, these unlogged acts stood as defiant secrets, preserved only in the hearts of those involved. One could almost hear the faint rustle of cloaks in the wind, carrying echoes of unseen kindnesses. The mystery of these unrecorded logs added a layer of enchantment, suggesting that true charity thrived beyond the reach of scribes and seals, in the gentle interplay of light and shadow. To expand upon this, consider the sensory tapestry of a pilgrim's halt at a forest edge, where the air was thick with the scent of pine and damp soil. The bread's surface, dusted with flour from a distant mill, felt grainy yet comforting under the fingers, and as it was broken, the crumbs scattered like stars on the ground, drawing small creatures from the underbrush. The soft murmurs of prayers, words like miserere and eleison, floated on the breeze, their cadence as soothing as a mother's lullaby. Historical examples from the Liber Pontificalis and the accounts of the Fourth Lateran Council underscore how such practices were encouraged, yet their daily execution remained elusive, a puzzle that invites quiet reflection. In another vignette, a group of pilgrims gathered around a fire, its flames flickering with a warm, orange glow that painted their faces in soft hues. The crackling wood released hints of resin and smoke, while they shared not just bread but stories of past almsgiving, each tale woven with the mystery of forgotten deeds. One pilgrim might recall a rainy dawn when he gave his cloak to a shivering stranger, the fabric's rough weave slipping from his shoulders with a whisper of fabric against skin. Though the Church's records, such as those in the papal registers, focused on institutional charity, these personal narratives hinted at a vast, undocumented network of giving. As the seasons turned and the pilgrims pressed onward, their almsgiving practices remained a beacon of quiet virtue, untouched by the clamor of history's pages. The mystery of the unrecorded logs, like a gentle riddle whispered in the night, reminded all that some lights shine brightest in the unseen corners of the world. And so, as the stars wheeled above the ancient paths, we gently turn our thoughts to the next whisper of the past, where other tales await in the soft embrace of memory. In the soft haze of a 13th century autumn, when the leaves turned to whispers of gold and the air carried the faint spice of distant hearths, pilgrims wandered the ancient paths of Europe toward Compostela. These travelers, draped in cloaks of deep woolen hues embroidered with threads of silver and crimson, moved like shadows in the fading light, their steps a rhythmic echo on the worn earth. Far from the clamor of daily toils, they gathered where the roads converged, drawn by the promise of fleeting revels under the vast, star-strewn sky. The festivals unfolded in the cool evenings, as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the horizon in strokes of amber and rose. Men and women, weary from their journeys along the Camino, shed the dust of miles traveled and donned their festive garb. The cloaks, heavy with the scent of herbs and oils from far-off lands, swayed gently in the breeze, their colors catching the flicker of lanterns hung from makeshift poles. These lights, warm and golden, cast a glow that danced across faces, lined with both exhaustion and quiet joy, illuminating the simple pleasures of the moment. Drum echoes began softly at first, a low thrum that pulsed through the air like a heartbeat. drawing the pilgrims together in a loose circle on the grassy knolls outside the city gates. The rhythm built slowly, not with urgency, but with a soothing cadence that seemed to lull the night into submission. Players struck the taut skins with padded mallets, each beat releasing a resonant wave that mingled with the rustle of leaves and the distant call of night birds. Amidst this, flutes whispered melodies as light as mist, their notes weaving through the crowd like threads of silk, inviting bodies to move in gentle sway. The travelers, some with staffs still in hand from the road, formed lines that twisted and turned under the lantern glow. Cloaks billowed as they stepped, the fabric brushing against one another in a soft chorus of whispers, while the air filled with the earthy aroma of crushed grass and wildflowers. Feasting tables appeared as if by magic, laden with breads baked in stone ovens, their crusts golden and steaming, and fruits plucked from nearby orchards, plump apples and ripe berries that burst with sweetness on the tongue. Meats, roasted over open fires, released tendrils of smoke, laced with the scent of rosemary and salt, a humble bounty shared in the spirit of the gathering. Yet, as the night deepened, a subtle mystery wove through the celebrations, one that lingered like an unspoken secret among the pilgrims. Whispers spoke of unrecorded rites, ancient customs passed in hushed tones along the Camino, rites that no scribe had fully captured in their annals. These were not the structured ceremonies of faith or fellowship, but fleeting traditions born from the shadows of the road, where travelers invented rituals to mark their arrivals. In the dim light, some would trace patterns in the dirt with their toes, shapes that resembled stars or winding paths, their meanings lost to time. Others might hold aloft small tokens, perhaps a polished stone or a feather found en route, and pass them in a silent exchange, their eyes meeting in a knowing glance that hinted at stories never told. The mystery deepened with the toll of a distant bell, its chime a gentle reverberation that seemed to call forth these hidden practices. No one could say precisely how these rites began, for the Camino's records, preserved in faded parchments from that era, offered only glimpses. A chronicler from the court of Alfonso X might have noted the gatherings in passing, describing how pilgrims at Compostela engaged in dances that mimicked the wind's flow, their movements fluid and unscripted. Yet these accounts stopped short of revealing the core of the enigma. Was it a gesture of release? A way to shed the burdens of the journey through gestures as light as a breath? Or perhaps an echo of older forgotten ways carried by nomads from the edges of the continent, where the line between celebration and the unknown blurred like mist at dawn? As the drums quickened their pace, the pilgrims' cloaks swirled in a hypnotic rhythm, the fabric's edges brushing against the cool grass with a sound like distant waves. The lantern glow intensified, casting elongated shadows that played across the ground, each one a fleeting story of its own. In these moments, the air grew thick with the scent of pine smoke from the fires, mingling with the sweet tang of mulled wine passed in wooden cups, its warmth spreading through limbs tired from travel. One might taste the spice of cinnamon on their lips, a subtle wit in the way the drink lingered, as if the night itself were sharing a quiet joke about the road's endless surprises. Through the celebrations, the travelers moved with a grace honed by weeks of walking, their steps synchronized not by command but by the shared pulse of the drums. A woman in a cloak of forest green might lead a line of dancers, her laughter a soft ripple in the night, while a man with a weathered face played a lute, its strings humming melodies that evoked the rolling hills and river crossings they had all endured. The sensory tapestry was rich and enveloping, the cool touch of the evening breeze on skin, the faint grit of the path underfoot, the harmonious blend of voices rising in song, not chants of devotion, but tunes of wandering and wonder. Yet the unrecorded rites added a layer of intrigue, a gentle puzzle that unfolded in the periphery. In the quiet interludes between dances, when the drums paused and the lanterns flickered low, pilgrims would gather in small clusters, exchanging tokens or tracing symbols in the air with their fingers. These gestures, drawn from the depths of oral traditions along the Camino, held no formal record in the archives of the time. A 13th century account from a wayfarer's journal, perhaps scribbled by a lesser-known traveler, mentions such practices vaguely, noting how some pilgrims performed a silent ritual at the festival's peak, where they would face the stars and exhale as if releasing unseen burdens. The mystery lay in their impermanence, these rites vanishing with the dawn, leaving only questions in their wake. As the night wore on, the celebration softened, the drum echoes fading to a mere whisper, like a lullaby easing the world to sleep. The lantern glow dimmed, casting a final warm hue over the cloaked figures as they settled on the grass, sharing tales of the road and voices as smooth as river stones. The air, now cool and still, carried the lingering scent of the feast, a comforting reminder of the ephemeral joy found in such gatherings. In this way, the festivals at Compostela offered a respite, a gentle interlude in the vast tapestry of medieval life. And as the first light of morning crept over the horizon, painting the sky in pale blues and pinks, the pilgrims began to stir, their cloaks folded away until the next convergence. The mystery of those unrecorded rites remained, a subtle enigma to carry forward, whispering of secrets yet to be uncovered. For now, though, the road called once more, leading toward new horizons and the quiet promise of what lay ahead. In the soft hush of a 13th century European evening, where the sun dipped low over the rolling hills of France, pilgrim camps nestled like quiet nests among ancient oaks and whispering grasses. Women in heavy woolen cloaks, their hoods drawn against the chill, moved with a steady rhythm around the flickering firelight, their hands busy with the unseen threads of survival. These were the guardians of the journey, the silent architects of endurance, their roles woven into the fabric of medieval pilgrimage like the very stitches they cast. The air carried a gentle scent of wood smoke and damp earth, mingling with the faint herbal aroma of poultices brewing in clay pots. As the flames danced low, casting warm, golden hues across weathered faces, one woman sat cross-legged on a worn blanket, her fingers deftly working a bone needle through a torn cloak. The scratch of the needle against the coarse wool was a soft, rhythmic sound, like a distant lullaby echoing through the camp. It spoke of mending not just garments, but the weary spirits of those who traveled far from home, seeking sanctity at shrines like Compostela or the Holy Land. In these pilgrim families, women bore the weight of daily sustenance with a grace that history often overlooked. They were the ones who, upon reaching a makeshift camp after days of trudging dusty roads, unpacked the essentials with quiet efficiency. A mother's cloak, frayed from the brambles of forgotten paths, might be repaired under the starlit sky, her movements precise and unhurried. The firelight played across her features, illuminating the fine lines etched by years of such labors, while the warmth seeped into her bones, easing the ache from miles walked in sturdy leather shoes. These women managed the gear that kept the pilgrimage alive, tending to packs laden with bread, dried meats, and vials of holy water, ensuring nothing was lost to the elements or the bandits that lurked in shadowed valleys. Historical accounts from pilgrims like the anonymous author of the Guide for Pilgrims to Santiago offer glimpses into this world, though they often skim the surface of women's contributions. In one such tale, a woman named perhaps only in passing by a chronicler is described as the keeper of the camp's hearth. She stirred embers with a long stick, the wood crackling softly as sparks rose like fireflies into the night. The warmth enveloped her, a comforting embrace after the day's trials, and the scent of roasting herbs filled the air, calming the restlessness of the group. Yet, beyond these recorded duties, there lay a deeper mystery, the unrecorded tasks that women undertook in the shadows of history. What unseen burdens did they carry, these cloaked figures who mended not only cloth but the fragile hopes of their families? Perhaps in the quiet hours before dawn, they whispered prayers over hidden ailments, their voices a soothing murmur against the wind's gentle sigh. The scratch of the needle continued, a steady counterpoint to the distant hoot of an owl, as she reinforced a seam on a satchel, her mind wandering to the herbs she had gathered along the way, wild thyme for flavor, yarrow for healing. These small acts, though vital, slipped through the cracks of written records, leaving only faint traces in the margins of manuscripts. One might imagine a woman pausing, her needle poised, to gaze at the stars that pierced the velvet sky. The cool night air brushed her cheek, carrying the faint, earthy tang of dew-kissed grass, and she felt the weight of unspoken responsibilities. In Pilgrim families, women often served as the bridge between the spiritual and the mundane, preparing meals that sustained the body, while their thoughts dwelled on the soul's quest. They ground grains with stone mortars, the soft grinding sound a rhythmic hum that blended with the fire's crackle, creating a symphony of serenity amid the uncertainty of the road. From the accounts of travelers like the English pilgrim Gervase of Tilbury, we learn of women who navigated the perils of the journey with quiet resolve. They packed and repacked the family's belongings, ensuring that the heavy crosses and relics remained secure, their cloaks swaying gently as they moved. The firelight caught the glint of a silver brooch, a rare heirloom pinned to their garments, reminding them of home even as they pressed onward. Yet, Gervase's words hint at more the subtle ways women maintained order in the camp. From organizing the tents to soothing frayed tempers with a word or a gesture, their roles extended beyond the visible, into realms where history's gaze faltered. In the dim glow of the campfire, another woman knelt beside a low flame, her hands cradling a pot of simmering stew. The steam rose lazily, carrying the rich, savory scent of onions and wild garlic foraged from the roadside. She stirred slowly, the wooden spoon scraping against the pot's edge with a soft metallic whisper, a sound that evoked the comfort of hearths long left behind. This task, while essential, was but one layer of her contributions. Beneath it lay the mystery of those duties never chronicled, the private vigils kept for the ill or the lost. Perhaps she offered counsel in the dead of night, her voice a calm thread in the tapestry of the pilgrimage, guiding decisions that shaped the group's path. The fire's warmth bathed her in a golden light, and the scratch of her needle, now set aside, lingered in the air like a fading echo. Historical fragments, such as those in the Liber Sancti Jacobi, speak of women who accompanied pilgrims, yet they rarely delve into the intricacies of their daily lives. What secrets did they guard in their hearts, the herbs they mixed for unseen ailments, the stories they spun to ward off despair? As the night deepened, the camp grew still, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of a nightingale. The women, their cloaks drawn close, embodied a quiet strength, their mending a metaphor for the resilience that carried families through trials. One might picture her leaning back against a tree, the bark rough, yet comforting under her palm, as she surveyed the sleeping forms around her. The air was cool and clean, tinged with the smoky residue of the fire, and the stars above seemed to whisper of journeys yet to come. In these moments, the mystery deepened the unrecorded tasks that wove through their days like invisible threads. Did they chart the stars for navigation, their eyes tracing constellations with a knowledge passed down through generations? Or perhaps they preserved oral traditions, stories of saints and miracles that never found their way into ink and parchment. The scratch of the needle resumed, a soothing cadence that lulled the camp into repose, each stitch a silent testament to their enduring role. Through the lens of pilgrim accounts, such as those from the Cistercian chronicles, we catch echoes of this world. Women, like the fictional, yet representative figures in these tales, managed the flow of resources, ensuring that water skins were filled from clear streams and that provisions lasted through barren stretches. The sensory details linger: the cool touch of water on parched lips, the earthy taste of foraged roots, the gentle weight of a mended cloak settling over shoulders weary from the road. Yet it is the enigma that captivates, the shadow of tasks forever lost to time. In the calming glow of the fire, one woman might have paused to reflect, her fingers still, as the night breeze carried the faint scent of blooming wildflowers. What other roles did they play, these pilgrims' partners, in the quiet forging of faith and family? As the embers faded into the dark, the camp settled into a peaceful slumber, the women's labors a lullaby that eased the way toward tomorrow's dawn. And so, with the first light whispering on the horizon, one might turn thoughts to the paths ahead, where other stories await their telling. In the fading light of a 13th century European twilight, where the sun dipped behind ancient oaks and the air grew cool with the promise of stars, a group of pilgrims gathered around a modest campfire. They were weary travelers, cloaked in heavy wool that whispered against the grass as they settled, their faces softened by the dance of flames. These men and women from distant villages and forgotten hamlets had journeyed far along dusty paths that wound through forests and over rolling hills, seeking not just destinations, but the shared comfort of stories under the vast, indifferent sky. The fire crackled gently, its embers popping like distant memories, releasing a scent of wood smoke that mingled with the earthy dampness of the ground. One pilgrim, an older man with a lined face and a voice like the rustle of autumn leaves, drew his cloak tighter and began to speak. His words flowed soft and rhythmic, a lullaby woven from the threads of lived experience and borrowed lore. "In days long past," he murmured, "when kings walked these lands and rivers whispered secrets to the stones, there were tales that bound us like the threads of our cloaks." Around him his companions leaned in, their breaths forming faint clouds in the cooling air. A woman with silver hair tucked under a hood nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting the fire's warm glow as she added her own fragment to the weave. The group hailed from varied walks: a blacksmith with calloused hands, a merchant who had bartered his way across borders, and a weaver whose fingers still fidgeted with invisible threads. Each carried stories, not just in their minds, but in the very fabric of their travels, tales passed down through generations of wayfarers who trod the same roads before them. The crackling logs provided a steady backdrop, their sparks rising like fireflies into the night, while the soft murmur of voices created a cocoon of sound that dulled the distant howls of wolves or the rustle of leaves in the breeze. These pilgrims recited tales of knights who roamed forgotten forests, their armor gleaming under moonlight, or of clever peasants who outwitted noble lords with wit sharper than any sword. One story spoke of a humble farmer who discovered a hidden spring in a remote valley, its water said to carry the essence of ancient wisdom, refreshing not just the body but the spirit weary from endless miles. Historical accounts from medieval chronicles, such as those preserved in the works of chroniclers like Matthew Paris or the anonymous scribes of the Anglo-Norman texts, offer glimpses into these traditions. Paris, in his Chronicles of the Era, noted how travelers on the roads to places like Compostela, or the shrines of lesser-known saints, would pause at wayside camps to share narratives that preserved the collective memory of their times. These stories were not mere entertainment. They were lifelines, carrying the weight of history through oral chains that linked one generation to the next. As the fire's warmth seeped into their bones, the pilgrims' voices rose and fell like the gentle waves of a distant sea, each tale building upon the last in a tapestry of human endurance. Yet amid this soothing ritual, there lingered a quiet mystery, the enigma of lost oral tales, those ephemeral narratives that vanished like mist at dawn. Imagine, for a moment, the untold stories that slipped through the cracks of history, never committed to parchment or stone. A pilgrim might recount a legend of a ghostly wanderer who appeared only on fog-shrouded moors, guiding lost souls back to the path, but such tales often faded with the teller, unrecorded and thus adrift in time. The chronicles hint at this void. For instance, in the margins of a 13th century manuscript from a monastic scriptorium, a scribe once jotted a note about tales of the road that die with the wind, suggesting that many accounts were deliberately omitted or forgotten, perhaps because they challenged the order of the day, or simply because they were too fragile to endure. The air around the campfire grew heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, the flames casting long, flickering shadows that played across the pilgrims' faces like silent actors in their stories. One tale unfolded of a young apprentice who, during a perilous crossing of the Alps, befriended a hermit living in a cave etched with ancient runes. The hermit's words, spoken in a dialect long since muted, spoke of treasures buried not in gold but in the memories of the earth itself. As the apprentice shared this, the group fell into a rhythmic hush, broken only by the occasional pop of a log or the soft sigh of the wind through the trees. Such narratives, drawn from the chronicles of travelers like the anonymous author of the itinerary of Benjamin of Tudela, who documented journeys across Europe and beyond, added layers of authenticity to their evenings, grounding the fantastical in the real hardships of the road. Subtle wit threaded through these recitations, a gentle undercurrent that eased the weight of their trials. The blacksmith, with a wry smile hidden in his beard, might jest that his hammer had forged not just tools but tales, each strike on the anvil shaping words as much as metal. His companions chuckled softly, the sound like the trickle of a nearby stream, acknowledging the irony of how hardship often birthed the most enduring stories. Yet, even in lighter moments, the mystery of what was lost remained, a shadow that lent depth to their gatherings. Chronicles from the period, such as those in the Historia Regum Britanniae, allude to oral traditions that influenced written works, but they also reveal tales of ordinary folk that never made it into the grand narratives, perhaps because they were deemed too mundane or too subversive. As the night deepened, the fire's glow softened, and the pilgrims' voices grew even more hushed, their words blending with the chorus of crickets and the distant call of an owl. Sensory details enveloped them, the warmth radiating from the coals, the faint taste of smoke on their tongues from shared sips of watered wine, the rough texture of their cloaks against skin weary from the day's march. One pilgrim, a former scribe with ink-stained fingers, wove a story of a map-maker who charted not just lands but legends, only for his work to vanish in a storm-tossed sea. This tale, echoing the accounts in medieval itineraries, hinted at the fragility of knowledge passed solely by word of mouth, a mystery that intrigued rather than alarmed, inviting reflection on what might still lie hidden in the folds of history. Through these exchanges, the pilgrims found solace, their stories a balm for blistered feet and heavy hearts. The chronicles affirm this practice. For example, descriptions in the works of Giraldus Cambrensis speak of travelers exchanging tales at rest stops, fostering a sense of community amid isolation. As the fire began to wane, its last embers glowing like fading stars, the group fell into a contented silence. The air now cool and still, carrying only the whisper of leaves settling for the night. In this way, the tradition endured, a quiet rebellion against the impermanence of life on the road. Yet the mystery persisted. What tales had slipped away, untold and unremembered, lost to the ages like echoes in an empty hall. Perhaps, in some forgotten corner of the world, a similar fire still burns, where voices carry on the legacy, bridging the gap between past and present. And so, as the pilgrims drifted toward sleep, their minds lulled by the gentle rhythm of shared words, the night eased into dawn's approach, whispering of journeys yet to come and stories waiting to unfold in the segments ahead. In the soft hush of a 13th century dawn, along the winding paths of the Camino de Santiago, pilgrims emerged from the mist like shadows cast by ancient oaks. They traveled in weathered cloaks, their hoods drawn against the chill, each step a quiet rhythm on the earthen trails that threaded through sleepy villages of stone and thatch. Here, in places like the hamlet of Burgos or the outskirts of Pamplona, where the air carried the faint scent of baking bread and wild herbs, these wayfarers paused to mingle with the locals, exchanging not just goods but glimpses of distant worlds. The interactions unfolded with a gentle cadence, as if the world itself were whispering secrets meant for twilight hours, far from the clamor of courts or cathedrals. The pilgrims, often weary from days of trudging under heavy skies, arrived at village squares where market stalls stood like quiet sentinels. These simple wooden structures, dusted with the fine grit of the road, held treasures from afar, spices from the Levant, woolen fabrics dyed in deep earth tones, or small vials of frankincense that released a warm, resinous aroma with every uncorking. A local farmer, his hands calloused from tilling the soil, might lean over a stall to barter for a pilgrim's knife, its blade honed sharp enough to slice through the toughest bread. The exchange began with a nod, a subtle tilt of the head that spoke volumes in the language of necessity. Coins clinked softly in leather pouches, their metallic ring echoing like distant bells, a sound that blended with the rustle of leaves and the low murmur of voices. In these moments, the pilgrims shed their aura of solemnity, revealing the subtle wit that flavored their tales. A traveler from Aquitaine, his cloak frayed at the edges, might jest about the weight of his pack, comparing it to the burdens of the soul, while the villager chuckled and countered with a story of his own harvest woes. The air grew thick with the scent of fresh apples piled high on carts, their skins glossy and cool to the touch, and the faint spice of mulled wine simmering in clay pots nearby. These trades were more than mere commerce. They wove a tapestry of shared humanity, where a pilgrim's foreign coin bought not just provisions, but a momentary kinship. Yet, amid the calm rhythm of these encounters, a quiet mystery lingered, like fog settling over the riverbanks at dusk. Whispers spoke of unrecorded deals, agreements struck in the dim light of back alleys, or beneath the sprawling branches of an old olive tree, where words were exchanged but never noted in the ledgers of history. Drawing from the sparse but vivid accounts in the Codex Calixtinus, those ancient guides to the Camino, one hears of transactions that vanished into the ether, perhaps a pilgrim trading a rare manuscript page for a hidden map of safer paths, or a local offering shelter in exchange for stories that could never be verified. These dealings, absent from official records, carried an air of enigma, a subtle dance of trust and secrecy that left no trace but the faint imprint on memory. What if, in the glow of a hearth fire, a villager passed along a talisman said to ward off bandits, receiving in return a promise of prayers at Santiago's shrine? Such arrangements, hinted at in the margins of pilgrim diaries from the era, added a layer of intrigue, a whisper of what might have been, without the stark lines of documentation. As the sun climbed higher, casting a golden haze over the village, the sensory details of these interactions deepened. The dusty stalls, their surfaces etched with the patina of countless hands, released a dry, earthy scent with each item handled, mingling with the sharp tang of salt from preserved fish brought by coastal traders. Pilgrims, their cloaks heavy with the road's grime, would run fingers over bolts of linen, feeling the cool weave against skin warmed by the journey. A child might dart between legs, giggling as coins exchanged hands with a soft, deliberate clink, the sound drawing smiles from all. In one such village, near the fields of Navarre, a pilgrim from Paris bartered for a pair of sturdy boots, their leather creaking under inspection, while the local cobbler shared tales of the region's ancient springs, their waters cool and mineral-rich, bubbling up from unseen depths. These exchanges were steeped in the everyday magic of the Camino, as documented in the pilgrim guides of the time, which noted the route's reliance on local goodwill. A woman selling herbs might offer sage for a pilgrim's ailments, her voice a soothing murmur as she described the plant's leaves, crisp and aromatic when crushed. The wit emerged in light-hearted banter, like when a pilgrim quipped that his cloak, patched from travels, had seen more villages than the local elder, eliciting a wry grin and a better price on goods. Yet the mystery persisted, those unrecorded deals, perhaps a silent agreement to share a meal in exchange for news of the wider world, left an indelible mark. In the evening, as fires crackled and embers glowed with a warm, flickering light, one could imagine the shadows holding secrets, conversations that slipped away like smoke, unmentioned in the annals but alive in the collective memory of the path. Historical accounts, such as those in the 12th century Liber Sancti Jacobi, provide glimpses into these interactions, emphasizing the pilgrims' role as cultural bridges. In a village along the Pyrenees, for instance, travelers might trade Frankish wine, its rich, fruity bouquet filling the air, for local cheeses with a creamy, nutty flavor. The process was deliberate, almost ritualistic, with each item inspected under the soft light of lanterns, their flames casting gentle flickers on faces lined with experience. Subtle wit flavored the air, as a pilgrim might remark on the wine's journey mirroring his own, drawing a knowing laugh from the locals. These moments fostered a sense of unity, yet the enigma of undocumented pacts added depth. What hidden bargains were made in the quiet of night, away from prying eyes, where a nod or a handshake sealed fates without witnesses? As the day waned, the interactions took on a lullaby-like quality, the village growing still as pilgrims prepared to move on. The sensory tapestry wove together the cool breeze carrying hints of wildflowers, the soft thud of goods being packed, the distant lowing of cattle in the fields. Drawing from Camino lore, one recalls how such trade sustained the journey, fostering resilience in the face of uncertainty. The mystery of those unrecorded deals, perhaps involving rare artifacts or whispered alliances, lingered like an unsolved riddle, a thread of intrigue that bound the pilgrims to the locals, in ways history could only hint at. In the fading light, as the stars began to prick the sky, the pilgrims gathered their belongings, their cloaks rustling like leaves in a gentle wind. These encounters, rich with the clink of coins and the dust of shared spaces, left an imprint of calm connection. Yet, as they departed, the unrecorded mysteries whispered on, a subtle reminder of the unseen bonds that shaped the Camino's soul. And so, with the path ahead calling, the travelers pressed on toward new horizons and the next chapter of their odyssey. In the soft hush of a 13th century evening, along the ancient paths of Europe, where the Camino wound through whispering forests and rolling hills, a small band of pilgrims paused to tend to their weary garments. The sun dipped low, casting a golden veil over the trail, and the air carried the faint scent of wild thyme and damp earth. These travelers, cloaked in simple woolen robes frayed from miles of dust and dew, settled on a mossy outcrop their fingers moving with quiet purpose as they mended what the journey had worn thin. It was a ritual as old as the roads themselves, a moment of respite, where cloth and thread wove stories of endurance and faith. One pilgrim, a man named Tomas, with a beard touched by silver and eyes that held the distance of distant shrines, drew a bone needle from a leather pouch. The needle, smoothed by generations of use, caught the fading light like a sliver of forgotten starlight. He sat cross-legged, his cloak pooled around him like a second skin, and examined a tear in his tunic, a ragged split along the seam where thorns had snagged during the day's trek. The fabric, once a sturdy weave of undyed wool, now bore the patina of travel, flecks of mud embedded in the fibers, the faint grit of path dust that crinkled under his touch. With a gentle breath, Thomas threaded the needle, the thin flaxen string whispering against his calloused fingers, a subtle scratch that echoed the rhythm of his heartbeat. Beside him, a woman called Elena, her face lined with the quiet wisdom of many pilgrimages, worked on her own cloak. She had unraveled a small length of yarn from the hem, salvaging what she could to patch a hole near the shoulder. The evening breeze stirred the air, carrying the earthy aroma of the cloth, warmed by the day's sun and now cooling against her skin. Elena's movements were deliberate, almost meditative, as she aligned the edges of the tear and began to stitch. Each pull of the needle through the wool produced a soft, rhythmic sound, like the distant murmur of a stream, accompanied by the faint resistance of the fibers yielding to her touch. The wool, coarse and resilient, held memories of the villages they had passed, traces of hearth smoke, and the salt of sweat from long hours under the open sky. In those days, pilgrims relied on simple tools and time-honored methods passed down through whispers and shared fireside tales. Artifacts unearthed along the Camino, such as the delicate bone needles found in the ruins of medieval hostels near Burgos, spoke of this craft. These relics, often preserved in the dry earth of ancient resting places, revealed needles carved from animal bones, their eyes worn smooth by repeated threading. Historical accounts, like those in the Codex Calixtinus, a guide for pilgrims that emerged in the mid-12th century, hinted at such practices without delving into the intricacies, leaving modern observers to piece together the puzzle. Tomas, in his quiet way, might have used a similar needle, dipping it into a small pot of beeswax to strengthen the thread against the elements. The wax, gathered from wild hives along the path, added a subtle sweetness to the air, mingling with the musty scent of the cloth as he worked. As the shadows lengthened, another traveler, a young novice named Matteo, joined them with a bundle of freshly picked leaves. He had learned from an elder in a roadside abbey to use plantain and comfrey for cleaning stains, a technique born of necessity on the long roads to Santiago. Matteo knelt by a shallow stream, the water's gentle ripple providing a soothing backdrop, and soaked a corner of his tunic. The fabric, heavy with absorbed moisture, felt cool and pliant in his hands, the water seeping into the weave and loosening the embedded dirt. He rubbed the leaves against the stains, their fibrous texture creating a faint, satisfying friction that released the grime in cloudy swirls. The process was tender, almost tender, as if the earth itself were aiding in the restoration, the leaves' bitter aroma rising like a herbal incense to ward off the chill of night. Yet, amid this careful mending, there lingered a gentle mystery, one that softened the edges of their labors like a half-remembered dream. Whispers among the pilgrims spoke of lost techniques, methods that had faded with the centuries, their secrets buried in the forgotten corners of medieval lore. Perhaps it was the art of blending specific herbs to create dyes that never faded, or the intricate knotting that reinforced seams against the harshest weather. Artifacts from the Camino, such as the fragments of embroidered cloth discovered in the crypts of Pamplona, suggested skills beyond the ordinary stitches so fine they mimicked the veins of a leaf, now impossible to replicate without the precise knowledge of long-gone artisans. Tomas paused in his work, his needle hovering, and gazed at the stars emerging overhead, wondering if those ancient makers had infused their threads with prayers or hidden symbols, techniques that time had erased like footprints in the rain. It was a subtle enigma, one that added a layer of quiet intrigue to their evening routine, reminding them that even in preservation, there was loss. Elena, ever practical, shared a snippet of wisdom she'd gleaned from a manuscript in a monastery scriptorium. She described how pilgrims of old might have used urine to set dyes or clean fabrics, a method drawn from Roman traditions that persisted into the 13th century. As she spoke, her voice low and rhythmic, like the sway of branches in a breeze, she demonstrated on a small patch of cloth. The acrid scent, though mild in the open air, evoked a sense of the pragmatic ingenuity that defined their world. She worked the liquid into the fibers with careful strokes, the fabric yielding under her fingers, emerging cleaner and more vibrant. It was a humble act, yet it carried a wit all its own. The idea that even the body's waste could be turned to purpose, a clever twist on the hardships of travel. As the night deepened, the group fell into a companionable silence, the only sounds, the occasional rustle of cloth, and the soft exhalations of concentration. Mateo's hands, now damp from the stream, moved to dry his mended tunic over a low fire, the flames flickering gently and casting warm hues on the fabric. The heat drew out the wool's natural oils, filling the air with a comforting, woody fragrance that wrapped around them like an invisible cloak. In these moments, the maintenance of their clothing became more than mere repair. It was a communion with the past, a way to honor the threads that bound them to the saints and the soil beneath their feet. Historical examples, like the preserved textiles from the shrine at Santiago de Compostela, illustrated how pilgrims adapted to their environment. A cloak found in such relics might show signs of repeated darning, the stitches overlapping in patterns that suggested a communal effort, each loop a testament to shared survival. Tomas, reflecting on this as he finished his seam, felt a subtle humor in the way the cloth seemed to resist complete renewal, as if it preferred the stories etched into its wear. Yet, for all their care, the mystery persisted. How had those early artisans achieved such durability with so little? Perhaps, in the quiet folds of forgotten manuscripts or the etchings on pilgrim badges, lay clues to techniques that modern eyes could only imagine. As the fire dwindled to embers, Elena folded her mended cloak with a satisfied sigh, the fabric now soft and supple against her arm. The night air grew cooler, carrying the distant call of an owl, and the pilgrims prepared to rest, their garments a little more whole for the morrow's path. In this gentle rhythm of care and contemplation, they found solace, knowing that even as they preserved what they could, the lost arts of their forebears whispered through the shadows, a soft enigma waiting to be uncovered. And so, with the stars as their witnesses, they turned their thoughts toward the dawn, where new trails awaited and the cycle of maintenance would begin anew, leading seamlessly to the tales of devotion that followed. In the fading light of a 14th century autumn, the ancient trails of Europe wound like forgotten ribbons through the hills and valleys, their once vibrant paths now softened by layers of moss and fallen leaves. Pilgrims, fewer in number than in centuries past, moved with a quiet resolve, their cloaks frayed and heavy with the weight of time. The air carried a gentle chill, whispering through the trees as if sharing secrets of bygone eras, and the earth beneath their feet crumbled softly, releasing the earthy scent of decay mingled with wild herbs. It was a world in gentle retreat, where the hum of devotion had dimmed to a murmur, and the reasons for this slow unraveling remained shrouded in a tender mystery, like a half-forgotten dream. These trails, etched into the landscape by generations of seekers, spoke of a time when faith drew thousands to distant shrines and holy sites across France, England, and the German lands. Now they lay in a state of serene neglect, their stones smoothed not by the press of feet, but by the patient work of rain and wind. A pilgrim might pause at a wayside cross, its carvings weathered to faint outlines, and feel the cool touch of stone against their palm, evoking memories of grand processions that no longer came. The cloaks they wore, once symbols of pious journeys, hung loosely, their threads unraveling like the threads of history itself. In this hushed world, the decline was not a sudden storm, but a gradual twilight, a soothing fade into obscurity that left one wondering at the unseen forces at play. Church records from that era, preserved in the dim archives of Canterbury and Rome, offer glimpses of this transformation, though they speak in whispers rather than shouts. Scribes of the time, dutiful in their illuminated manuscripts, noted the ebb of pilgrims with a detached precision, as if observing the turning of seasons. In the rolls of the Abbey of Cluny, for instance, entries from the 1340s show a marked drop in alms collected at the gates, where once coins clinked like a joyful chorus. The records attribute this to the great pestilence that swept through Europe, leaving villages empty and hearts heavy, yet they do so with a calm detachment, focusing on the quiet aftermath rather than the anguish. One might imagine the scribes, their quills scratching softly on parchment, pausing to listen to the wind outside, as if the air itself carried tales of fields left untended and shrines standing alone. As the pilgrims trudged onward, their steps muffled by the damp earth, the sensory world around them painted a picture of gentle decline. The paths, once lined with vibrant wildflowers and the calls of merchants, now offered only the subtle crunch of dry leaves underfoot and the faint, woody aroma of decaying wood from fallen branches. A quiet shrine might appear through the mist, its altar draped in shadows, where the lingering scent of old incense mingled with the crisp autumn air. Here a pilgrim could rest, feeling the cool stone bench against their weary bones, and sense the absence of the crowds that once filled these spaces with hymns and prayers. It was as if the land itself had sighed and settled into a deeper peace. The mystery of why this happened, weaving through the air like a soft fog that obscured clear answers. Historians, drawing from the Cartulary of Saint Denis and other medieval documents, point to economic shifts as part of this enigma, though the records themselves remain coy on the details. The 100 Years' War, with its distant clashes echoing like distant thunder, disrupted trade routes and left purses empty, yet the church ledgers speak of it indirectly, through lists of unpaid tithes and abandoned hostels. One entry from a monk in Avignon notes the waning of the faithful's feet upon the sacred ways, a phrase that carries a subtle wit, as if the paths themselves had grown tired of waiting. The pilgrims, and their worn cloaks that brushed against the undergrowth, embodied this change, their numbers thinning like the leaves on the trees, a consequence felt more than explained. In the quiet hours of dusk, when the sky blushed with the soft hues of sunset, the shrines stood as silent witnesses. A traveler might approach one, touching the faded frescoes on the walls, their colors muted by time, and hear only the gentle rustle of wind through the grass. The mystery deepened here, for while church records from places like Westminster Abbey detail the decline in visitors, they offer no definitive cause, leaving room for whispers of divine will or unseen curses. Perhaps it was the schism of the papacy, with popes in both Rome and Avignon, that sowed doubt in hearts, or perhaps the rise of local devotions that drew people closer to home. Whatever the truth, it lingered like a half-heard melody, soothing in its ambiguity, inviting reflection rather than alarm. The pilgrims themselves, with their steady gait and downcast eyes, seemed part of this lullaby-like world. Their cloaks, patched and softened by countless washes, carried the faint scent of smoke from roadside fires, a reminder of simpler travels. As they passed through forgotten clearings, the air filled with the subtle sounds of nature reclaiming the land, the chirp of crickets in the evening and the distant hoot of an owl, as if the wilderness were gently mocking the human retreat. Church annals from the era, such as those in the Liber Pontificalis, note the closing of pilgrim hospices with a calm resignation, focusing on the redistribution of resources rather than loss. It was a decline wrapped in subtlety, where the grim undercurrents of famine and conflict were touched upon only as distant echoes, their consequences unfolding like a slow river current. Yet, amid this serenity, there was a subtle wit in the way the world adapted. The paths, once crowded, now allowed for a more intimate communion with the landscape, where a pilgrim could feel the cool mist on their face and taste the tartness of wild berries along the way. Records from the Cistercian monastery speak of repurposed chapels, their altars now serving as storage for harvests instead of relics, a practical turn that carried a quiet humor, as if the faithful had decided to feed the body when the spirit grew weary. This unrecorded mystery of why the decline went unchronicled in full added a layer of intrigue, like a story left unfinished, inviting the mind to wander through possibilities without haste. As the seasons turned, the trails continued their gentle decay, with vines creeping over milestones and the soft patter of rain washing away the last footprints. A pilgrim, resting beneath an ancient oak, might close their eyes and listen to the rhythmic drip of water, feeling the weight of history in the air. Church documents from places like Chartres Cathedral hint at internal reflections, with monks pondering the ebb of divine callings in their diaries, yet they leave the core enigma untouched, a soothing puzzle for the ages. In this way, the decline became not a tragedy but a lull, a transition from the clamor of faith to the hush of introspection. Through it all, the sensory tapestry wove a calming narrative, the warmth of a setting sun on tired skin, the earthy taste of stream water sipped from cupped hands, and the faint, melodic chime of a distant bell tolling for no one in particular. It was a world inviting rest, where the mystery of unrecorded causes lingered like a soft blanket, wrapping the mind in gentle wonder. And as the paths grew quieter still, one could almost hear the whisper of what lay ahead, drawing us toward new horizons with the promise of yet more tales to unfold. In the quiet hush of a Spanish dawn, where mist clings to ancient stones like a gentle veil, the legacy of medieval pilgrims stirs anew in the heart of Compostela. Here, beneath the sprawling oaks and the soft whisper of wind through cathedral spires, modern seekers archaeologists with careful hands and patient eyes uncover remnants of journeys long faded into legend. These are not mere relics, but echoes of souls who walked the Camino de Santiago, their paths etched into the earth like faint, forgotten lullabies. Drawing from the pages of UNESCO's World Heritage Reports on the Camino and the meticulous records of the Museum of Pilgrimage in Santiago, we trace this enduring tapestry, where dusty wood and glinting metal speak of a world transformed. Imagine the scene as the team begins their work, the air cool and earthy, carrying the faint scent of damp soil and wild herbs that bloom along the roadside. The archaeologists, clad in soft earth-toned jackets, move with a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat, their tools, brushes, and trowels gliding over the ground like a mother's hand, smoothing a child's hair. In this serene expanse, just beyond the cathedral's shadow, they reveal the first of the staff's buried treasures from centuries past. Each one emerges slowly, the wood aged to a deep, velvety brown, dusted with the fine, silken particles of time that catch the morning light in a subtle dance. One staff, perhaps, bears faint carvings, the lines worn smooth by rain and wind, evoking the touch of hands that gripped it tight through mountain passes and river fords. The metal tips, if any remain, glint faintly under the sun's first rays, a muted shimmer like stars fading into day, hinting at the craftsmanship of blacksmiths in medieval forges. This discovery, documented in the archives of the Santiago Museum, reminds us of the Pilgrims' profound influence on Europe's cultural weave. In the 12th century, as UNESCO notes in their assessment of the Camino's heritage, these travelers were more than wanderers. They were weavers of community, carrying stories and seeds of knowledge across borders. Their journeys fostered the exchange of ideas, from the illuminated manuscripts of monastic scribes to the architectural marvels that dot the landscape, like the Romanesque churches that stand as silent guardians. Yet, in this calm retelling, we sense a subtle wit in the irony of it all. How these humble staffs, once practical aids for weary feet, now rest in climate-controlled cases, inspiring tourists who trace the same paths with modern maps and comfortable shoes. As the excavation continues, the sensory details unfold like a soft melody. The wood, when lifted, releases a whisper of aged resin and moss, a fragrance that lingers in the air, evoking the forests pilgrims once traversed. One might imagine the faint creak of the staff as it's carefully extracted, a sound as gentle as a sigh, paired with the cool, smooth feel of the metal ferrule against gloved fingers. These artifacts, preserved through the centuries as per museum records from institutions like the British Museum's medieval collections, reveal a legacy that extends beyond borders. In France, for instance, similar finds along the Via Turinensis route, another arm of the Camino, show how pilgrims influenced local customs, from the sharing of communal meals in wayside hostels to the development of early trade networks. UNESCO's reports highlight how these exchanges helped shape the European Renaissance, with pilgrims disseminating medical knowledge and artistic motifs that echoed in cathedrals and manuscripts far and wide. Amid this peaceful unveiling, a mystery weaves through the narrative, one of forgotten tales that add a layer of intrigue without disturbing the calm. What stories, lost to the mists of time, do these staffs hold? Perhaps one, with its intricate knotwork carvings, once belonged to a scribe from the Abbey of Cluny, who chronicled visions of distant saints in verses now silenced. Or maybe it was carried by a merchant from Venice, whose accounts of Eastern spices and philosophies influenced the courts of Europe, as subtly noted in UNESCO's documentation of cultural routes. This enigma lies not in dramatic revelations, but in the quiet gaps of history, where sensory echoes the imagined weight of a staff in hand. The rustle of robes against stone paths invite contemplation. It's a mystery that charms with its subtlety, like a lullaby half-remembered, drawing us into the unknown without haste. The archaeologists pause at midday, the sun warming the earth to a comforting glow, and share stories over simple meals of bread and olives, their voices low and rhythmic. They speak of how these artifacts connect to modern life, as seen in the UNESCO-supported revitalization of pilgrimage routes, where walkers today find solace in the same landscapes. In Germany, for example, museum records from the Rhineland archives reveal similar pilgrim relics that inspired contemporary festivals, blending ancient rituals with community gatherings. The wood of the staffs, with its grain like whispered secrets, might remind one of the yew trees planted along medieval paths, their bark rough yet reassuring under touch, symbolizing resilience and renewal. As evening approaches, the light softens to a golden haze, casting long shadows that dance across the unearthed treasures. The glinting metal now catches the last rays, a subtle sparkle that feels almost alive, as if the pilgrims themselves are nodding in approval. This legacy, rich with historical depth, extends to places like Italy's Via Francigena, where UNESCO reports detail how pilgrim routes influenced urban planning and social structures. Here, the sensory world amplifies the cool, damp feel of moss on stone markers, the faint, earthy taste of water from ancient wells, all tying back to the core of Compostella's finds. In expanding this tale, we delve deeper into unique details. Consider the tactile memory of the staff's handles, smoothed by countless palms, each groove telling of blisters healed and prayers murmured. Or the visual play of light on the metal, a soft refraction that mimics the flicker of candlelight in medieval chapels, as preserved in museum dioramas. Historical examples abound. In Portugal, records from the Porto Museum illustrate how pilgrims' legacies shaped maritime explorations, with artifacts like these staffs inspiring tales of adventure that echoed in the Age of Discovery. Yet through it all, the tone remains detached, observing the consequences of time's passage without dwelling on hardships, for the true wonder lies in the continuity. As the day fades, the archaeologists gently rewrap their finds, the dusty wood settling back into protective layers with a soft rustle. This moment of closure hints at the broader tapestry, where the echoes of medieval pilgrims continue to resonate. And so, with the stars beginning their quiet vigil above, we prepare to turn the page toward the next chapter of enduring histories. Word count, 1500.